you at these websites, massvetsadvisor.com and mass.gov/veterans. To learn more, email the Franklin Post of the American Legion at mapost75@gmail.com. Local community radio in the public interest. This is WFPRLP 102.9, Franklin Public Radio. Visit us anytime, day or night, on the web at WFPR.FM. Thanks for being with us.
Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello again, everybody, and thank you for joining Kim and I this week on The Wonderful World of Wine, right here on Franklin Radio, WFPR 102.9. How are you today, Kim?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Everything is good. It's always nice to sit down and talk about wine. There's always so much going on we'd like to tell our listeners about.
Mm-hmm.
And today we wanted to start with an article that was on a website called Eat This, Not That. And it was called The Most Popular Wines in Every State. And when Kim and I saw this article, we said we kind of had to talk to our listeners about it because we think there's something weird going on with this article. That's my impression I was getting from you, Kim, on this.
That's what I was, trying to get at. Something a little bizarre about some of these. Some of these make sense, but I could not really find how they came to the conclusion that certain wines were the most popular in each state. Like, what do they mean by most popular? Is it, I don't know.
They said they use Google Trends. That could be anything. You could just, I don't know, search hashtags and follow it by state, who's hashtagging Cabernet, and then related to a state. But going back to this not publication, but this website, over the years, we talked a few of their articles, and I found a lot of controversy, I think, with what they post.
I agree.
I thought this was one that it was interesting and controversial, so I thought we should and say why. So, I mean,
Good evening. Time being 7 o'clock, I call the May 4th, 2022 meeting of the Franklin Town Council to order. Please pause for a moment of silence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Announcements from the chair. All citizens are now welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person. Meetings are live streamed by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29. In an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone, or you may click the Zoom link that is on the posted agenda and on the town's website. Phone number is 929-205-6099, and the meeting ID is 832-9243-7744, and then you need to hit the pound sign. If residents are just interested in watching the meeting, it will also be live streamed by Franklin TV and again shown on Comcast Channel 11 and Verizon Channel 29. One other announcement, Councillor Chandler is just had some minor surgery and he is unable to attend this evening and will not be coming in remotely. Next item on the agenda, citizens' comments. Citizens are welcome to express their views for up to 3 minutes on a matter that is not on the agenda. The council will not engage in a dialogue or comment on a matter raised during citizens' comments. The town council will give remarks appropriate consideration and may ask the town administrator to review the matter. Is there anyone in council chambers that would like to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? Please, just come forward, name and address, please.
Colin Cass, 146 Long Hill Road. Use the note. I've been thinking about the environmental crisis. If you've been paying attention, you can name a dozen ways in which the global environment is threatened. So I won't bore you with another rehearsal. I've also been thinking about our abundance of other crises, also too familiar to need reciting. The effect of all these crises on the environmental problem is predictable because we have been watching the same show for the past 30 years. Attention will shift, a sense of urgency will be lost, priorities will get reshuffled, targets and deadlines will slip again. We will be offered some low-hanging fruit or maybe just more promises. Interested parties will get their way, and the problem will not have been solved. My question is, what should the Franklin Town Council be expected to do in the face of a global problem like climate change? The council could leave it to the international community to figure it out, or the federal government, state government, political parties, the courts, corporations, environmental groups, dedicated individuals. Unfortunately, the inadequacy of all these solutions is well known. So I'll offer my own solution for what it's worth. Of course, we should accept help wherever it comes from, but the town should expect to act independently and single-mindedly toward net zero for Franklin. No town business should occur without net zero as an explicit objective. The town's budget should begin from that expensive premise. The result will be imperfect, of course, but Franklin will continue to behave like the green community that it is and should be.
Thank you, Colin. Is there anyone else in council chambers that would like to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll go out to Zoom land, and is there anyone out on Zoom that would like to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? I don't see anybody. Alicia, you see anyone? Okay, moving on. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the March 16th, 2022 meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, additions, deletions. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'd now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from April 6th, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, additions, deletions. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on. The next item on the agenda is proclamations and recognitions, and we have one this evening where we are going to recognize Harriet DiMartino, who reached her 100th birthday on April the 18th, and I know Her two sons are here, Donnie and David. I know Harriet is home watching on Zoom. So with that, I'd ask Donnie and Dave to come up to the microphone. Okay, Town of Franklin, a proclamation honoring Harriet DiMartino on the occasion of her 100th birthday. Whereas Harriet DiMartino was born on April 18th, 1922 in Lancaster, New Hampshire, to Cora and Frederick Congdon, attended Lancaster schools and graduated from Lancaster High School, where she played varsity basketball. And whereas Harriet attended and graduated from the University of New Hampshire, where she met her future husband, Dominic DiMartino, with whom she shared a passion for ballroom dancing. And whereas during World War II, Harriet taught school while Dom was drafted into the Army and was assigned to the China-Burma India Theater, where he assisted with the building of airport runways with the Army Corps of Engineers. And during their years apart, Harriet and Dom wrote one letter a day, every day, to each other. And whereas Harriet and Dom were married on June 1st, 1946, and moved to Franklin soon thereafter, where they built a home on Lincoln Street and shared more than 6 decades together, raising their 5 children, hosting annual Thanksgiving dinners for the extended family, avidly supporting the Patriots as a 25-year season ticket holders, running the family business, DiMartino Construction Company, and spending summers at their cottage in West Falmouth. And whereas Harriet and Dom, upon their retirement, enjoyed their time together between a condo in Hollywood, Florida, their summer home in West Falmouth, and their family home in Franklin until Dom's passing in 2011 at the age of 91. And whereas since 2018, Harriet has resided at her home in Franklin, where she welcomes visits from family and friends and enjoys reading crossword puzzles and Sunday Mass broadcasts from Notre Dame, remains a loyal New England sports fan, and is a loving and devoted mother of her 5 children, grandmother to her 9 grandchildren, and great-grandmother to her 8 great-grandchildren. Wow. Now therefore be it known that Harriet DiMartino is recognized with warmth and best wishes by the Town Council of the Town of Franklin on the occasion of her 100th birthday, April 18, 2022, signed Thomas D. Mercer, Chairman, Franklin Town Council. I do think Mr. Roy, Representative Roy, has a proclamation from
Yes,
the
indeed.
state.
Yes, indeed. Well, congratulations, having a mom who goes to 100 and a dad who went to 91, and that was on Lincoln Street in Franklin. I would suggest bottling that water and selling it. You guys will make bottling. It's my great pleasure to bring you a resolution from the Massachusetts House of Representatives congratulating Harriet. Is Harriet Citizen One on Zoom here? Oh, she's on television.
She's watching it.
Watching it on TV. Hello, Harriet. So I have these resolutions which actually have to be heard on the House floor, and it was heard on April 14th of 2022. And Harriet, it was unanimous. Everybody loved you, and they loved hearing the story about your life. It reads very much like Chairman Mercer read, but there were a few things that were not in his that I do want to call to your attention. And I especially like that Harriet and Dom annually hosted the Congdon side of the family for Thanksgiving, and she was a fabulous baker of pies and cookies, and to this day, her cookie jars always have treats for those who visit. And Harriet, I'll be over tomorrow. So keep that cookie jar full. And I want to say that the members of the Massachusetts House of Representatives hereby join with family and friends in paying honor and tribute to Harriet DiMartino and extend to her their sincere congratulations and best wishes on the occasion of her 100th birthday and living life to the fullest. And be it further resolved that a copy of these resolutions be forwarded by the Clerk of the House of Representatives to Harriet DiMartino. It's signed by Ronald Mariano, the Speaker of the House, Stephen T. James, the Clerk of the House, and myself, whose great honor it is to be Harriet's state representative in the legislature. So let me present this to both of you. And not to be outdone, but the governor heard I was coming here tonight and to celebrate a 100th birthday, and he asked if I would be so kind as to deliver a certificate from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts saying, Harriet DiMartino, on behalf of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I congratulate you on the joyous occasion of your 100th birthday, this 18th day of April in the year 2022, and it's signed by both Charles Baker and Karen Polito, the Lieutenant Governor. So congratulations. Tell Mom we love her. Say hello. And Harriet, we'll see you tomorrow for those cookies.
I've been a Franklin resident all my life, or my mother would say not quite yet, all my life. But married my high school sweetheart. We are Franklinites to the core. This is an incredible honor. Thank you very much. And I didn't know who to give this to, but the three pictures, I believe Chairman Mercer has seen these on my phone. But some pictures of Mom blowing out her candles on her 100th birthday there. So awesome. I'll at least have the council appreciate that she looks pretty good for her. One of these years we'll actually do it, but there's a T-shirt that you see in those catalogs that says, you know, I'm trying to live forever and doing pretty well so far. Well, Mom, thank you very much.
Thank you, Donald. Okay, moving on, I'm going to change the order up a little bit, and out of respect for Congressman Auchincloss's time, he's trying to make the circuit all around his districts. So with that, Congressman, please come forward. And first, I'd like to welcome Congressman Auchincloss, and I just want to thank you for attending the Franklin Town Council meeting. As far as I know, and I've been involved in local government for almost 4 decades, Franklin has never had their congressman attend a meeting to discuss policy at the federal level and how it can benefit our organization here at the local level. So we thank you very much for your willingness and bravery to attend this evening and be the first federal elected representative to visit one of our meetings. For the public tonight, I want everyone to know that I made this inquiry to the congressman because there's been so much activity at the federal level on infrastructure. I thought it might be helpful to have a discussion regarding this evening. I want to focus on federal policy that affects the operations of our local government, our organization, not every federal issue that's out there. Not that they're not important, but we asked the congressman to come for his time to talk about things that affect us right here in our community. So without further ado, Congressman, please.
Chairman Mercer, town councilors, State Representative Roy, thank you for having me. I'm feeling like I'm coming in a little light here. You had a town resolution, a state resolution, a governor's resolution for Harriet. I don't have a congressional resolution. If I had known, I would have gotten Joe Biden to sign something. But happy birthday, Harriet. May we all have 100 years as well lived as yours clearly have been. Chairman, I would like to go over federal policy that we are working on in the 117th Congress that I think that we can get passed in the next 6 months before the midterms. If that's okay with you, I think it'd be helpful for our constituents to hear what we're working on in Congress, and not just the whole panoply of everything that every wish list item from every member, but truly 5 things that I think we can accomplish in the remainder of 2022. And I'll be brief, and then of course welcome questions from our constituents on them. And I'm going to start at the widest scope and then zoom in to the local, if that's all right with you. And at the widest level in international affairs, we are still grappling daily with the greatest assault on the post-war international rules-based order that we've seen in my lifetime, certainly, which is the war in Ukraine. Starting on February 24th, as Russian tanks rolled across the border, we have seen an assault on Ukrainian sovereignty, democracy, prosperity, and their right to self-determination. Despite the best efforts of U.S. intelligence and U.S. diplomacy, Europe was largely caught unsuspecting by that invasion. But we have rallied in unity, NATO and allies in East Asia as well, in support of Ukraine. And will continue to provide substantially a blank check for any arms, training, and materiel that the Ukrainian forces need to defend their homeland against this unprovoked invasion. On April 19th, this war really pivoted from a more mobile war of maneuver centered around the capital in Kiev towards a war of attrition in the east, with the Russian focus clearly now on claiming control over the Donbass and southern Ukraine, trying to landlock and dismember the country, and trying to gain control over the population that has the largest percentage of Russian speakers and that has some of the more economically prosperous parts of the country. And Congress remains in bipartisan, strong consensus that that's an unacceptable outcome. We are seeing Republicans and Democrats from far apart come together and in strong support of the president's sending of arms, ammunition, defensive and offensive equipment, humanitarian aid, and the imposition of economic sanctions against Russia to try to give the Ukrainian forces the fairest fight they can possibly get. And it certainly remains my commitment, and I know the commitment of many in Congress, that we are seeking a complete Russian defeat in their attempts to dismember the sovereignty of Ukraine. We are also, of course, dealing with the ongoing international challenge, transnational challenge, indeed, of COVID. 2 years in, we have largely gotten back to normal, and that is to be celebrated. And yet we know that we need to maintain vigilance in preparing and preventing future surges and variants of COVID. There is a $15 billion package pending in Congress that would really allocate funds across 3 different purposes. One would be research and development at the National Institutes of Health to study new variants, to prepare a universal coronavirus vaccine, and to work with the private sector to make sure that we can produce a new vaccine if necessary in record time. $9 billion would go towards stockpiling critical therapeutics and other personal protective equipment, and $5 billion would go towards international vaccination efforts, especially for countries that had not hit the 70% vaccination threshold that is the World Health Organization target. $15 billion to prevent and prepare for a future surge is money well spent. An ounce of prevention worth a pound of pain. We've spent trillions dealing with the ramifications of COVID, and I strongly believe, and I'm working towards $15 billion to put us in the best possible position to ever prevent any more of the strife and strain that we all experienced over the last 2 years. Part of what we all went through between the pandemic and the war has been a real upending of supply chains and a recognition domestically that our supply chains, our manufacturing, are not as resilient as they should be. And this is the third item that I believe Congress can pass in the coming 6 months, which is the America Competes Act. This is a largely bipartisan effort, many sections of which being bipartisan, the overall package we'll see, that makes critical investments in manufacturing and workforce development, in research and development, basic science, which of course Massachusetts excels in, supply chain resilience, and job training, all of which, one, will make our country more resilient and sustainable, but two, will have the effect over the medium term of lowering costs and making us more productive. Finally, not finally, but fourth, many of our constituents will have heard the ongoing saga in 2021 of Build Back Better and the various domestic priorities that were being bandied about and debated and which stalled in the Senate. A significantly slimmed down version of that package, I think, is possible to pass, and I would support passing. The citizen who spoke first here tonight talked about the urgency of the moment for climate change, and this package, while not an all-encompassing fix, would be the largest investment in clean energy and climate resilience in history by any entity, government or private sector. $550 billion for clean energy tax credits, paid for through slightly higher taxes on corporations and high-income individuals, and through Medicare negotiation of drug prices. This is a bill that we have the votes for. We've got the votes in the Senate to pass this bill. We've already passed it in the House, which I voted in favor of, and it's time to bring it to the floor and ensure that the United States can meet the commitments we made in Paris, and thereby has the moral standing to twist some arms in our international engagements to get other countries to meet their Paris Accord commitments. We absolutely need to pass this before the midterms. We also need to pass before the midterms the Electoral Count Act, which would formalize that Congress's role in tabulating electoral results from the states is ministerial only, that there is no role for Congress or the Vice President in recognizing alternative slates of electors. We saw this, of course, on January 6, 2021. That was my second day in office. And the disinformation surrounding the Congress's role in formalizing Electoral Count Act led in some measure to the attempted insurrection that we saw at the Capitol. And we should not be reliant on any one individual's judgment, as we were with Vice President Mike Pence. It should be formalized into law. We've got bipartisan consensus on the Electoral Count Act reform, and that, as with the others, we need to pass before the midterms. And then finally, I'll close with the most directly local, which of course is infrastructure. We passed in March of 2021 the American Rescue Plan, which did a number of things. It got shots into arms. It helped the schools reopen. It provided relief to the hardest hit Americans through $1,400 relief checks. But it also provided roughly $350 billion to state and local governments nationally to be used for a wide variety of purposes, but infrastructure being one of them. Massachusetts received something like $8 billion in this package, $5 billion for the state and $3 billion for municipalities. And we then, in the fall of 2021, passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, which provided a further $1 trillion for water, transit, roads and bridges, and electrical grid improvements throughout the country. Massachusetts receiving somewhere on the order of $8 to $9 billion from that package. All of this to say is that there are historic sums of money available for the long-standing liabilities that I know that Franklin and other towns are confronting, whether it's subsurface infrastructure, fixing roads and bridges, improving your transit stops, water treatment facilities. And I am committed to working with you to ensure that we've got local, state, federal alignment to add up to 100% on these projects. I've met already one-on-one with Franklin town officials to understand your priorities. I know you're spending a big chunk of your ARPA funds on water projects, which I think, having seen 33 other towns use their funds, I think is a tremendously wise investment, and I commend you for that. I think that is really going to go a long way. The state's Clean Water Revolving Fund, is going to be significantly plussed up by this bipartisan infrastructure law. And so any projects that you can put on that docket have a higher chance of success. And I know with State Representative Roy, you've got one of the most able legislators in the State House to help you be the most competitive you possibly can be for the state programs that can match local funding. And I'm certainly here to help with your water infrastructure needs, for which there are federal grants as well. Transportation, the same, and housing, which I know is a significant issue, especially senior housing in Franklin. Happy to continue working with you on all these issues. And Chairman, I'm happy to take questions now.
Thank you, Congressman. Okay, I will go to the council first. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman, thank you so much for coming today. Really, it's truly an honor to have you here. And if as he is correct, you're the first of any to come visit the Franklin Town Council. It's an honor to have you here. You and I last met on Thursday, January 27th in your office. It was a pleasure to sit down with you and discuss many issues. And one of the things I wanted to bring up at a local level that I'd like to reiterate, if possible, is the Franklin Ridge Housing Authority. I know Town Administrator, that's a big deal for him as well, is senior housing, which I know the Franklin Ridge Housing Project will best benefit our seniors. One of the things many people may not know is my grandmother-in-law, who unfortunately passed away about 3 or 4 years ago, was a beneficiary of the existing senior housing, which is over there near the skating rink. This will definitely benefit our citizens. Unfortunately, a lot of us are getting old in this town. Eventually, I might need some
Speak
space.
for yourself.
Eventually, I might need some space up there. That's just one thing I wanted to bring up, just as kind of in your ears.
So the number one issue I hear from constituents north and south of the district, and the district I represent stretches from Fall River to Brookline, Franklin to Easton, is the cost of housing. In Massachusetts, in Greater Boston in particular, over the last 20 years, we've created 2.5 jobs for every 1 unit of housing. And you don't have to be an economist to know what happens when you do that. We've got a lot more demand than we have supply, and prices have been spiraling double digits year over year. It's become a crisis. It is our single biggest handicap as a state for our economic competitiveness, for our ability to attract new business and retain existing businesses. And of course, it's the biggest challenge we have for our citizens who are seeing costs spiral on many facets of their life, but housing is the biggest chunk of their wallet. So I'm a member of the Financial Services Committee, which has jurisdiction over housing. I won't go through every single line item of what we've been working on, but suffice to say that we are looking to far better capitalize the public support for housing development, particularly the LIHTC program, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which has been a very successful, very effective federal catalyst for private sector development of affordable housing. I've engaged with the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state level in support of the Franklin Ridge Senior Housing Project, and continue to be here to work with you on that development and others.
Just one more thing. Thank you, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman. Congressman, not to keep your time, I know you're busy. We have, and I know I mentioned this to you once before, is we have a kind of a daunting underlying major infrastructure issue that we eventually need to address in hopes that we can gather as much funding both locally, state, and federally if possible to address what we refer to as our Beaver Street Interceptor, which is basically one of our largest sewer outflows from the town. And eventually, we're going to need to start funding that project because it's 100 years old, and eventually, well, I shouldn't say eventually, it could break. And if that breaks, that would be an extremely expensive thing for the
A
town.
DPW director sitting in
My counsel, for what it's worth, and I don't claim to know the full town's capital improvement priorities, and I know from my time as a city councilor that is a very intricate process. What I will just say is this, is there is more funding available for water infrastructure than there, I would say, arguably ever has been, maybe since the sewers were first constructed in Massachusetts 100 years ago. Because we've got the bipartisan infrastructure law, we've got the American Rescue Plan, so 2 different sources of federal funding. We've got the state, which is, with the PFAS issues, with their lowering of the parts per trillion that's acceptable, the state has put new monies down for this. This is a time to act. Now, every other town in my district is also recognizing that, so it's competitive. But as I said, your decision to put ARPA funds down towards water, I think, is a signal of how serious and how committed and the kind of planning that Franklin is putting towards this, and I think it bodes very well.
Congressman, thank you for your time and answer my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. Councilor Frangillo.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to echo the thanks for coming. This is fantastic. One of the things that was touched upon by the constituent who mentioned our role in addressing the climate crisis. I'm currently working with students to inventory where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from, and I expect with fairly high confidence that what we'll find is similar to the rest the country, and that most of our emissions are coming from transportation. And as we continue to put money into infrastructure, how do we ensure, how have we been ensuring that we're not continuing to fund the very same system that led to the amount of emissions that we have? Most, right around the corner, we're about to put 300 million, or proposing to put 300 million into the 495-90 interchange, which will improve some safety and get a few more cars through. But for less than half that money, we could double the tracks on Franklin, fully electrify that rail, have multiple trains going, and get a whole bunch more riders off the road, and make it a lot easier to get into Boston. And we also have a regional transit authority that's struggling to have an efficient bus system. How do we continue to encourage states and local governments to use that money on things that are in line with our climate goals?
I agree with everything you said in the premise of that question. And as a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, at the federal level, we worked to make the bipartisan infrastructure law much less car-centric in its approach. Now, I would be disingenuous if I said we fully succeeded. We did not. It is still, more than to my liking, a bill that thinks of mobility as single occupancy vehicles. And we do have a lot of work to do to fix our roads and bridges in the country. I don't think anybody's denying that we've got to pave the roads and fix the bridges. We are pulling back significantly on the expansion of new highways, which is success in and of itself. And there are many, many more funding streams available for on-demand transit, for public transit. And Massachusetts is getting about $2.5 billion for public transit overall through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and through investments in walking and cycling infrastructure as well, all of which are, as you know, through your strong towns engagement, really critical for improving our carbon footprint and also public health and civic engagement more broadly. I will say I was able to speak with Secretary Buttigieg, who is the head of the Department of Transportation, when he first took office, and he said, when we were talking, he bragged about being the first mayor in the Midwest to abolish parking minimums. And that is a strong indication that the Secretary of Transportation of the United States is thinking differently about mobility. So I think you guys can all appreciate that abolishing parking minimums is a tough thing to do at the local level. That he would brag about that is a indication that he is truly thinking differently, and it's I've been engaged with him to make him aware of bus issues that we have and commuter rail issues that we have in Massachusetts, so that when we start to submit these projects for the regional and federal grants, that he's keyed into it.
Thank you very much.
Also?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Frangillo. Councilor Hamblin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Congressman, for being here with us tonight and all your comments so far. I do want to quickly ask you a question about the America Competes project. What is it? America
Competes Act.
Competes Act. Yes. So we talked about the supply chain issues, and I think all of us feel that from the town to the local stores. But one of the other things that came to light during the pandemic was food insecurity and food security in the food supply chain as well. And how do we make sure that we have local food that's fresh? And so have you thought about that in this America's Compete Act?
So the food supply chains are not, the short answer is that they're not really being addressed by the America Competes Act. The America Competes Act is a lot about semiconductor manufacturing, which has been is one of the reasons, for example, that cars, probably the primary reason that cars have become so much more expensive alongside the lockdowns in China. Mm-hmm. So Competes does not really address the food supply chains, partly because that's done through a separate committee, through a separate process known as the Farm Bill. What I will say, though, is that working with my colleague Jim McGovern, who is really the most prominent advocate for food security in all of Congress and has made that one of the hallmarks of his career, we are making serious progress on guaranteeing that every school-aged person, every school-aged child in the United States gets a fully nutritious set of meals every single day. To stop with school lunch debt, for example, to guarantee breakfast and a hot lunch. This is something that was crystallized during the pandemic, that when the schools were closed, it was not just lack of academic and socio-emotional development for kids, but actually a lack of access to nutrition for kids. I expect that this term or next, we are going to get to a place where nationally we're able to guarantee that kind of food security for children at least.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hamblin. Councilor Cormier-Ledger.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Congressman. It's nice to see you again. I'm hoping that it falls in line with some of your comments on the COVID crisis and how you outlined the 5 priorities that you're dealing with. And I know that things have gotten a little derailed with COVID, but I think I can speak for a lot of people that these are tough times, right? These are times people are scared. People don't really know what to believe anymore. They're looking to elected officials for messaging, for hope. And I remember you ran on a platform of public safety, and you talked a lot about trying to end gun violence, trying to work on drug addiction problems. And I'm just wondering if you have a message for our constituents listening tonight that might give them a little bit of hope in these very, very, very difficult times. We've seen an uptick in local hate crimes. We've seen an uptick in mental health issues. We've seen an uptick in people not really knowing quite what to do next. And I think people's nerves are on edge. And we'd be great if we could turn to our federal officials and say, what can you guys do to help?
I think about this daily. There's a surge in children's mental health issues, talking with school adjustment counselors, with mental health providers, with teachers and parents and students. Yes, it was in large measure the pandemic, but we know that there were serious challenges before the pandemic as well. And we've got to address children's mental health, not just on the supply side, on providing enough of the beds and inpatient and outpatient services that they need, but also having hard conversations about what is driving this foundationally. Why are kids, so many kids, not in great socio-emotional shape? And what it feels like to me from talking to constituents young and old is that there is a pervasive sense of anxiety right now. Anxiety about the systemic challenges that we have, whether it's COVID or climate change at the international level, or war, price hikes that are forcing really hard trade-offs. And yet there's not a sense of agency. People don't feel oftentimes that they themselves can make an impact. And so that asymmetry between anxiety and agency leads to, I think, that sense of hopelessness, like you were saying. And yet I think what has made this country great is that we have never given into that sense of hopelessness, that it is always Americans looking at challenges and rolling up their sleeves and binding themselves together in voluntary and political associations to overcome them. I've got every confidence that we're going to do it again. I really do. And although Congress looks totally dysfunctional on TV, I get that. If you watch MSNBC or Fox, or if you go on Facebook, you probably think that, we're all Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever, and just complete clowns. But, we're not. There are the vast majority of those people, whether I agree with them or not, are there trying to represent their constituents and trying to work together. And there's more things that we're agreeing on and are getting accomplished that are not making the news than are driving the polarization. So my workplace, like any other, can be frustrating at times. My colleagues, like everybody else's, can be frustrating at times, but I'm excited for the 118th Congress and to go back to work.
Great, thank you. Just one last thing. Could you give our class of 2022, our graduating seniors, can you give them some message, some sort of send-off?
Well, to double down on the point, and what I say to students all the time is get engaged locally. Get off the social media apps that you're on and get engaged locally with whatever problem or endeavor that you're interested in. Follow the passion, but start working with people in a authentic, face-to-face way. I think it is how we cut through so many of the superficial differences that we have, and also how real change is done sustainably.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cormier-Ledger. Councilor Sheridan.
Congressman, thank you for being here. I was very excited to hear about the biking money, because we have a realtor on Franklin, we're trying to get finished. Could you expand more on that?
Yeah, so as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's at least 2 grant programs, and we can get you the details. I don't have them on hand, but at least 2 different grant programs for cities and towns that are trying to do complete streets. So protected biking infrastructure, street trees, wider sidewalks, curb management. And usually these grants want to see that the town is putting down design and planning money, and that the state is matching it, or the state has prioritized it as well, and then the grant will come in to get it to 100%, and we're happy to share that information with you.
One last thing. I just bought what I hope is my last gas-driven car. So in the new Build Back Better bill, will there be more electric charging stations around, so the range anxiety?
So unclear.
Okay.
The new version of the slimmed down Build Back Better is not yet finalized. I do think that there will be funding in there as part of that $550 billion for clean energy tax credits for electric vehicle charging stations. I will say I am happy at the federal level to help catalyze the infrastructure around electric vehicle charging stations, but that is something that the private sector can put some money down for. The utility companies, actually some of the convenience store and gas station companies are trying to get into this business. So I don't want to just hand money to industry. I mean, they should be doing a lot of this themselves, but we can kickstart it with some federal funds.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sheridan. Councilor DeLoco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, Congressman. Doing a good job.
Thank you.
Nobody's even said he's done a good job.
We don't leave that for you to say.
No, just on the electric stuff, is there anything out there as far as long-term transportation? I mean, because if we can't do that electrically, I mean, we can do it with cars locally and everything like that, but I'm a Teamster, and right now we haven't, I mean, you can do electric trucks locally, but, long run, you can't do that. So I don't know if there's any money, put into that or.
There is, and actually the Department of Energy, I don't remember the name of the program, is working with the long-haul trucking R&D for exactly that reason. I mean, a significant share of the emissions are from long-haul trucking. Also, there's a lot of accidents with that as well. And we don't have the battery technology right now to power an 18-wheeler for any meaningful stretch of time.
Right.
I think, candidly, we're still pretty far away from that. I don't see that happening in the next couple of years. One thing I would say, though, and Councilor Frangillo pointed this out, transportation is the biggest chunk of U.S. emissions, transportation, agriculture, industry, building, stock. And yet, the United States is going to account for probably 15% of all future carbon emissions. So when we're talking about trying to get future temperature rises going from 3 degrees down to 1.7, which is broadly the goal, the answer, yes, lies with us, and we need to lead the way and walk the talk. But the actual emissions are coming from the developing economies, largely China, India, Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
And they're building dozens of coal-fired power plants every year still. And what we need to be able to do is to deliver cost-effective, highly energy-efficient means of powering those coal-fired power plants without coal. I'm talking about small modular reactors, fusion, geothermal, things that you can just swap out and still run the mechanics of that coal-fired plant.
That's where it is. That's where it lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor DeLoco. Any other councilors? Oh, I'd be remiss if I didn't have a couple. I know a year ago, you had an experience, a local experience here, where you were involved in a live burn at,
with me.
with the Franklin Fire
With me.
Department in Milford. And as you know, our fire chief is a constant advocate and has applied for a safer federal grant for more staff. Are there any updates on that grant process?
There are not any updates on that grant process. I'm with my district director right now. We can circle back and get you an update. I did send a letter in support of that, and we will make sure to continue to press it for you.
And if it makes any difference, just to follow up.
Sure.
I'm not sure you're aware, but our fire department was just given a Class 1 ISO grade.
Congratulations.
One of only 9 communities in Massachusetts to receive that level.
I know it. That's a hard distinction to get, and that takes an incredible amount of work from the firefighters, of course, and also from the town council to make the investments necessary to get that kind of response time and the equipment they need. And it's going to benefit everybody with lower home insurance premiums. So.
Yeah.
I tried, but they said 2 in 1 of the same.
Really?
That's exactly
Oh,
what
that's
the insurance
nonsense.
company
Come on.
told me.
Get a new
I
agent.
called the next day.
Yeah, get a new agent.
Yeah. One other another question, not to slight. The police department, soon to become a fully accredited department. Chief Lynch and his staff have done a marvelous job during a difficult period of community policing across the country. I wanted to get your view on the future of policing in our state and what resources may be available for the Franklin Police Department as they aim to maintain the accreditation status or increase staffing.
We can get back to you with federal resources for police officers. I'm not aware of any, I don't believe you've applied for any grants that we're aware of, no. Please do keep us apprised if you're applying for those, and we're happy to offer you any resources that we have about what might be available. And I'll just say how strongly I respect and support the work that police officers do. They are critical in keeping our communities safe and welcoming. And I know that it has been harder and harder to recruit new police officers in the last couple of years. And we've got to create an environment where people want to put on the uniform and they feel respected in doing so.
Absolutely.
Okay, just to piggyback on Councilor Cormier-Ledger and the mental health issues. And this is just a comment more than a question, but wanted to get your thoughts. I think we're all aware of the spectrum of the problem, but oftentimes we feel hopeless in our ability to bring meaningful change or progress. The town's hiring a second mental health counselor for the police department through the ARPA funds. Thank you. While that will make a significant difference, it still feels like an uphill battle. And is there any consideration at the federal level to expand the mental health services?
There's a tremendous amount of work being done at the federal level for the expansion of mental health services. I couldn't even go through the full roster, but I'll name a couple of examples. One is funding for the training of mental health professionals. One of the severe challenges we have is we just literally don't have enough mental health providers of any kind of occupation, whether it's school adjustment counselors, whether it's psychiatrists, psychologists, et cetera. And so debt relief for people who take on those careers, grants for their education and training, helping the medical providers themselves do recruiting and training for their own workforce, and then also reimbursement policy. So much of American healthcare is driven by reimbursement policy, and the commercial insurers oftentimes look to Medicare as the standard setter because if its tremendous buying power, it covers so many Americans. And we are working to get Medicare to increase its reimbursement rates for mental health care, and also, and this is increasingly critical, having parity for telehealth versus in-person visits. There are times when it's appropriate and necessary to be in person. There are times when it's fully just as effective, and sometimes more effective, actually, to do it remote. And really, the professional should be the one making that decision, and the insurance company should be reimbursing them at parity.
Thank you. Finally, we all received notification from your office recently regarding the virtual U.S. Service Academy orientation
Yes.
for kids in grades 9 through 11.
Yes.
Great job.
Nice job.
So that's my list. I had to write them down because I'm old.
Chairman, I'll just say that one of the most fun parts of my job is getting to call these high school students to tell them they've been appointed to the West Point or to Annapolis or the Coast Guard Academy. Sometimes after a long day on the Hill, you get to talk to an 18-year-old who is just so excited to serve their country, and it's really so motivating. I'm looking forward to having another round of those calls next year.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone in the audience that, in the council chambers, that has a question? I think we hit an awful lot of them.
No, Ricky.
In the back, please, Mr. Ciccone, please come forward. Name and address, please.
Ciccone, Chestnut Street. I wonder if we might use the Congress's might, and when the time comes, some of these funds come through the feds with our MBTA. Many times through the years, I've been through meetings in this town where we try to get the MBTA to neaten up and revitalize, a word that gets used a lot lately, Dean Station, to make it more, handicap accessible, neater, better parking lot. It's a big part of our downtown. It's used all the time. It's what you want to see used going forward. You want less vehicles. I hope that you can use some of your might when the time comes to get the MBTA on board, not to just continue to give us lip service, which they have for many years, about the whistle issues, the lot down by Agway, which Mr. Valley fought for many years to get them to do something with, and they just turned a blind eye. So whatever help you can give us would be appreciated. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely. It's another example of where a local, state, federal partnership is going to be critical, and I spend a lot of time talking to the MBTA, and happy to continue to do so with Franklin.
Thank you. Was there another hand, please?
Eileen Mason from Beaver Street in Franklin. I'm a realtor in town here. I do a lot with the Downtown Partnership and trying to get commercial businesses in there. As you know, trying to get somebody to really thrive in a downtown environment that's all out at shopping plazas and everything is very difficult. So one of the things, the MBTA, continuing on that theme, is that Dean Station is great downtown, but we don't want to encourage more commuter parking down there. We'd like to get all that commuter traffic to be out at our Forge Hill station. And are there any funds or any way to get a fairly good-sized garage, parking garage, out there at that station so it can handle much more of the commuter traffic and take that transient people? They come in early in the morning and they get off the train in the afternoon and just take off, and they don't add any benefit to our downtown. So that would be one of the questions I have.
So the short answer is there are funds for public transportation improvements, including the parking formats. I want to be cautious about making promises because so much of it comes down to the MBTA and State Department of Transportation's own prioritization. And really where the federal grants come in is when a town and the state apply together for something. And the town says, here, we've done this. The state says, yes, we're prioritizing it on our internal roster, and we're gotten to 80% together and we need an extra 20%. Or we've gotten to 50% together and we want us to match it 1-to-1. So we've been working on that in a couple different areas in the district, and happy to be a convener in seeing if the state and the town of Franklin can work on a proposal to do that as well.
Yeah, because it goes hand in hand with what I think Kobe was saying before about
Absolutely.
the new rails and getting more riders
Yes.
on the rails, but we need a place for them to park. And we need that parking to be robust enough, and charging stations and all that.
And centralized. And
Centralized, and each one of the stations all the way into Boston needs this, not just Franklin.
And I would add, and I've had this conversation a lot of times with the state, is that it is way cheaper to store vehicles outside of the city center than it is in downtown Boston, right? It's overall at the state level a very cost-effective way to do the movement of people, which is really what this is about, right? And I think it's sometimes it's hard to kind of holistically plan like that, but it certainly makes sense.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the council chambers? I would have been surprised if you didn't stand up.
He's not a Franklin resident.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Congressman, I just want to thank you, because it was brought up before, but we are using your ARPA funds. It helped the town tremendously. We just passed our first stormwater utility, and some of those funds are going to be able to assist with that. At the local level, the council's been phenomenal through the years. We've put in more water line and infrastructure improvements than any other community our size, and because of the ARPA funds that come available, we'll actually move. We have a very strong, aggressive capital management plan, and we're actually able to move up another neighborhood that we're going to be replacing all the water lines, getting rid of some AC pipe a year ahead of schedule. So that worked out really, really well for us. And the Beaver Street Interceptor, just to give a little update, it's right in the middle of the SRS funding, so we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to
That's great.
afford that. We're getting to the final point. It was going to be $24 million, but I'm giving you a hint. The price is going up.
Price is going up for a lot of things.
Yeah, it's fine. Some supply issues and everything else, but we're in good stead for that. We should have the final numbers coming up in May. But thank you
awesome.
very much for the assistance. The extra work that we have to do now, you know what I'm saying? But thank you very much.
This is our DPW director,
Yeah,
by the way.
He's never really shy about introducing himself.
And he's not a Franklin resident.
Jamie, anything?
Nope, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Rachel Lucas from Anchorage Road. I think you must be processing right now what the rest of the country and Washington is regarding the Supreme Court and decisions that might be coming down. Having heard from multiple people here in Franklin and beyond, there's a lot of stress, there's trauma, and there's a look right now to figure out what Congress, where would they currently stand in their ability to be involved in this conversation, and what they currently view their role as. And I'd also like to know, as you this is all really fresh for all of us right now at this very moment, and I would like to know where you feel, what you think your job is right now.
Sure. So, just to put the context around your remarks, I'm sure many people here saw 2 nights ago a leaked draft of a Supreme Court majority opinion that would overturn Roe in a much more aggressive format than I think even court watchers were expecting. Now, it should be emphasized this is a draft ruling. Supreme Court justices often do and change their opinions or modulate their opinions, and it'll be months before we actually get the final verdict. But it looks increasingly likely that Roe v. Wade, which has been law of the land for 50 years now, is going to be overturned, which means that there will be no federal national protections for a woman's right to access an abortion. For constituents in Massachusetts, access to abortion will not change. The state codified the Roe Act in 2020, which guarantees reproductive health care as a right. And in 24 to 26 states in the union, that's going to be the same. But in the other half of the states in the union, they either have trigger laws that immediately are going to rescind access to abortion, or they're going to severely limit access to abortion to the degree that it's functionally impossible to get one for many women, especially low-income women. This, to me, is a travesty. I think access to reproductive health care is a human right, and the justice's draft opinion, to me, does not stand up to either legal scrutiny or does not meet the precedents that he claims it does. In the House of Representatives this term, we passed the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify nationally that women have a right to access to an abortion. The Senate has stalled out in considering it. It's one of many reasons I've called for the abolition of the filibuster, because Americans deserve a majority vote in the Senate to reflect their will. And Senator Schumer has promised that he will bring the Women's Health Protection Act or something substantially similar to the floor for a vote, so that Americans can at least see where their senators stand on the issue of whether they think reproductive health care is a basic right for all Americans. I think in the short term, those of us who are looking to protect women's right to reproductive health care in the states where it's going to be rescinded need to be working primarily with Planned Parenthood and Reproductive Equity Now and other groups like that, which have a strong track record and who are doing good planning for, with programs and services to reach those women through cross-state care and through the provision of medication by mail. We've seen in Texas, which put in place, as many of you are aware, an incredibly restrictive anti-abortion law some months ago, that abortions went down by, it's hard to measure, but looks like by about 10%, which was significantly less than was initially predicted, largely because of the efficacy of medications by mail and because a lot of women were able to access care across state lines because of the work of Planned Parenthood and other groups. So my focus, is going to be working with those organizations that can provide immediate and direct help to the women who are going to be affected, whose whole conception of what the Supreme Court affords them has been changed overnight. And then in the long term, it's going to be, we need to codify it in Congress, because regardless of what the final ruling is, we know that we cannot rely on the Supreme Court to uphold Roe anymore. It's just, it's been clear that that is not a firm foundation, and it needs to be the law of the land.
Thank you, Congressman. Is there anyone in Zoom that has a question? I don't see any hands up. You, Alicia? Okay. I want to note for the public, the Congressman represents 34 communities in Massachusetts. Nonetheless, I can say I have seen him in town, in Franklin, on many occasions.
Absolutely.
And his presence is very much appreciated. Especially given those 34 communities, everything in DC these days, and a beautiful new son born 9 months ago.
There you go.
Congratulations, Congressman, and thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate you having me.
We're going to take a 2-minute recess.
Supposedly is the equivalent, and yet to your point, they're in climate. Yes, they are taking more forceful action more sooner. That's all good, but they're totally different, and the reconciliation between the two of them is really going to be challenging, because it's more like, instead of saying, well, I said this and you said that, they're like whole sections that are different.
I've got bananas. No, here's a coconut, right? What are we? Yes, you're quite right. That's right. The House passed a very good bill that focused mostly on wind power.
Right.
And that, again, is because the roadmap calls for lots of renewable energy. The high tension wire that was going to come through Maine to bring us Hydro-Quebec failed. So all of a sudden we really need the wind power. The House is very pragmatically saying, yeah, let's make wind power. They pass a bill, and then the Senate nominally passing the companion bill, right, is completely different. We'll talk about that. But then at some point over the summer, the House and the Senate have to get together. And again, this is the word, you use the word, is this reconciliation committee,
right,
which is this weird process where I think they take two people from the two representatives and two senators.
Three and three, I think.
Right? They lock them in a room, right? And say, don't come out until you guys all agree. And they have to reconcile the language and what gets put in. And then it goes back in both houses. That identical language then gets passed. It's this huge process. And it's a burial ground, right? Or a minefield. There's all kinds of bad things that can happen trying to, anyway, so that's just processing. I think process stuff's important because people are often confused about, you hear that the Senate passed a bill and you think, well, they made a law. Well, no. That's just one baby step, right, in getting to where we all need to be. Okay, so having said that, let's talk about this Senate bill. And Steve, you've been following this as well. So correct me if I say something a little bit too far that's not right. But it's my understanding is that between the time the House passed its bill about wind turbine, climate bill about getting more wind turbines,
right,
the money from the Biden infrastructure bill, right, that they did manage to get through the Washington House and Senate, right? All of a sudden we have something like $250 million, a check for $250 million ringing in somebody's wallet.
I'll bring the meeting back to order. Next item on the agenda is hearings, and we have a couple of continued hearings. Chief is here. First one is TM1 Solutions Incorporated, doing business as 711, 37380 664 Union Street. Chief, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to turn it right over to Lieutenant Zimmerman.
Lieutenant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. If you'd like to just revisit the the report.
Please.
On Wednesday, March 2nd.
Oh, I gotta declare the hearing open.
Well, then I'd also like to indicate that I have spoken with the licensee prior to the commencement here, and I understand that he's prepared to acknowledge the violation to move things along as opposed to going to a full-blown proceeding.
Okay.
But I would ask that, suggest that he be given an opportunity to address the fact that he wasn't here for the first initial.
Sure.
Okay. Saved you some time, Lieutenant. Please, if you just come forward to the microphone and acknowledge the fact that you
Made a violation.
understand that you were in violation, and
Yes, I was at that location.
and
on that
just
day.
your name and address, please.
Mohammed Hijazi.
We need to be unmuted, but we're getting messages from people saying they can't hear us.
We're supposed to be muted. It's all right.
Okay, there we go.
So I'm the franchisee at that location, and my address is 29 Winston Lane, Dartmouth, Mass.
Thank you. This is a continued hearing from our April meeting, and I guess I'd first like to ask the question why you weren't present at our last meeting.
I
April
never got
13th.
April 13th.
I never got that notice.
Okay. Well, we all are,
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
I believe the first notice was actually mailed. I don't believe it was certified mail, so we can't really prove that they did, they got it. After the last meeting, Lieutenant Zimmerman had an officer take a notice to the two locations and hand-delivered the notice, so that we could confirm that they did get a notice that they needed to appear
Okay.
tonight.
okay. All right, Jamie.
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. To the chief's point, I just want to make note for those at home or here, that if they look in the packets, we have included all of the correspondence that the town did send on March 23rd, the letters to all of the, to the owners. But the important point tonight in speaking with all of the owners, in addition to Jimmy D's at the last meeting, all of them have told us that they did not receive the notice, but all of them have been incredibly contrite and forthcoming about the violations, and that there was no malicious intent, and there obviously must have been a problem, either someone threw it out, or something didn't get there in time, or whatnot. But to the chief's point, they did go hand deliver the second letters, and all of the owners are here this evening. So obviously, the communication, something happened. I'm not sure we can get to the bottom of it, but we can certainly move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Questions or comments from the council? Councilor Jones?
Mr. Chairman, I think in all fairness to the miscommunications happen. I don't think, simply based on the fact that the individual has confessed to the mistake, that it would be my suggestion to stick with our normal procedure, which would be to provide 3 days for the violation, 1 day served with 2 days held in abeyance for up to 2 years on the day, or on the weekday in which the violation occurred.
Agreed.
Is that a motion?
I would like to make that my motion, sir.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion to, for 3 days, one served, two in abeyance, hold two in abeyance, and it's on, to be served Wednesday. It was a Wednesday,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes.
So,
Well, one of the things we did for the last meeting was allow a date. So would, today happens to be the 4th, would the 11th serve?
we need to
fine?
put it into our motion.
Next Wednesday, the 11th.
So again, you have you sell alcohol, but you have another business, so you're just simply prohibited from selling alcohol that day. You can still be open for business, you just can't have the sale of alcohol.
Okay,
I would just like to add into my motion the date of May 11th to be served.
you okay with that, the
I
second?
second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Dharma Bhakti Corporation doing business as Liquor World, 365 West Central Street. Is somebody here representing them? Mark,
I have spoken to
Attorney
him.
Sorrell?
He's represented by his attorney as well, and I did speak with both gentlemen prior to the meeting, and the same thing, they do not challenge the violation, as I understand it. I'm sure he's prepared to acknowledge that publicly, and they also have a reasonable explanation that they simply didn't receive the notice the first time.
Sir.
So, good evening, my name is Attorney Ian Hedges, here on behalf of the licensee. So as was mentioned, there's no dispute as to the facts of the particular scenario that's mentioned in the incident report. As to the last week's hearing, or the prior hearing?
April 13th.
April 13th. So I think a similar thing happened. Liquor World's a fairly large liquor store, so they get a voluminous amount of mail from vendors. So it may have either just been misplaced or they simply didn't receive it. But second time around, they were served in hand, so hence the appearance tonight.
Questions from the council? Councilor Jones?
Mr. Chairman, again, in lieu of the miscommunication, and again, mistakes happen, that since the individual has confessed to making the mistake, we follow, again, our normal procedure as having the individual serve 3 days, one day being served, 2 days held in abeyance to be served on May 11th. Would that be suitable?
So
Does
we-
May 11th work?
Yeah, we would request that all 3 days be served in advance, just simply because Liquor World's been operating in town for 5 years. This is their first violation. They've had a clean track record thus far.
Can I continue on?
Yep.
Can I comment to his thing as part
No,
of it? No.
Once we get a motion in a second.
I'm gonna stick with my 1 day served, 2 days held in abeyance, up to 2 years, to be
Is there-
served on,
is
to
there
be
a
served on
second?
May
I'll
11th.
second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second discussion, and we've heard your request. Questions or comments from the council? Attorney Sorrell?
Our practice has always been in recognition of a first offense for businesses that have been in business a long time. And it is a first offense that's taken into account where it's only 1 day served and 2 held in abeyance. But there has to be some penalties to recognize the seriousness of the offense.
Thank you, Attorney Sorrell. Any other questions or comments from the council? Anything to beyond? Does May 11th?
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, the vote will come on the motion to have 1 day served and 2 held in abeyance. All those on May 11th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks.
You guys had it easy.
Thank you.
You.
Going forward, Chief,
Maybe
and
certified
Jamie.
mail?
everything like this will go out certified?
Absolutely.
Without question.
Without question. Already been addressed.
All right. Thank you.
I don't mean to interject in this, but I did like the fact that they were hand-served. Would be better suited. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of violations here, and they're not that often. So that this seemed to have been the most clear-cut way of assuring that this had indeed been received, I guess.
Certified mails,
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I just, these are so infrequent, and we send
Yeah.
out so much certified mail. I just think, you know, we just mailed them out, and it never even dawned on us that people may have thrown it away by mistake. I mean, 99% of the mail I get in the mail is all junk.
Yeah.
And sometimes people just throw things away, or, you know, someone even said to me, sometimes at the post office, you know, I don't know what to say, but I think the reality is that even for liquor license, anything, we'll be doing certified mail, and it just seems to make the most sense. It never even dawned on me that this would have been an issue.
Chief?
And I would agree with the town administrator, Mr. Chairman. In 15 years of doing this, this was the first time that somebody actually didn't show. So the
Yeah.
certified basically, you know, works. They do show up. We've never had that happen before. I think if they, you know, do certified, at least you'll know that they got it, and then they still didn't show up, and then you could decide what you wanted to do with something different, sir.
Understood, and I think we did the right thing. I guess there's just a little piece of me that says they knew they had an offense. And if it were me, I would certainly been looking for something to come in the mail. But
But we'll do whatever you want, Mr.
no,
Chairman.
that's fine. We'll move forward with certified mail. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you very much.
Yeah?
What's the difference between certified and registered? Certified, did they have to sign for it? No.
There's a-
Return receipt requested, yes, you can require them to sign for it.
Okay, because I think that if registered meant that they had to sign for it, then we would definitely know that they got
Costs
it.
us a lot.
Yeah.
But certified, they would sign
Certified's
for it.
adequate.
Okay, that
The
they
only
would
problem,
sign.
the only downside to certified is they can simply refuse to accept it, and it comes back unclaimed after 3 weeks.
But even if it comes back unclaimed after a few weeks, you know
Right.
that it still was
They were
delivered.
given
It didn't,
notice.
right, so you have some record of it.
In
Attorney
all
Sorrell.
fairness, the issue I spoke with Congressman privately on the way out was the fact that the unreliability of the US mail that I personally experienced in the last year or so. And he acknowledged it's a widespread problem, and he's getting complaints from a lot of his constituents, and they're looking at it.
Thank you, Attorney Sorrell. Lieutenant, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, our next hearing is street acceptance, and I would open the hearing on Joseph Circle.
You can open it on both of you.
Okay, I'll open it on both Joseph Circle and Susan's Way and a portion of Lawrence Drive. But we'll start with Joseph Circle. Jamie, you wanna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I was just having a side comment about the mail for a minute. She told me a shocking story, so I was like, I was a little taken aback there for a moment. She wins that one.
What happens when you go on vacation?
What? Yeah, that's what happens when you go on vacation. Reality leaves. So, through you, Mr. Chairman, so we have up on the screen and a public hearing, as you know, tonight for a continuation of our street acceptance program. Many residents around town, and as you know, we're trying to chip away at the street acceptances, and this is the next batch for Joseph Circle, Susan's Way, and a portion of Lawrence Drive to keep the the meeting moving along. I will dispense with all the pleasantries because I know we've all been through this many, many times before, and Mark and I are both here, as well as the town engineer, to answer any questions the council may have or the public may have.
Thank you, Jamie. Councilor Hamblin from EDC, do you have any comments?
We didn't talk about this.
Okay. All right. Then, is there any questions from the council?
I got one.
Councilor DeLoco has a
Thank you, Mr.
question.
Chairman. Joseph's Way, isn't some of that in Bellingham too?
This is just,
Just our section?
Yeah, just our section. He was already getting up. So impressive.
You can't beat an oil man, he knows everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Joseph Circle does extend into Bellingham. We're accepting the
Yeah.
portion from Beach Street to the town line.
Okay.
Beyond that, it's Bellingham.
I just didn't know, I just wanted to make sure it was right, you know.
Councilor Frangillo.
Yeah, same sort of question that I usually have, and I want to be sensitive to time. I understand that we accept these because it's expected of us to accept these, but they give us a rare opportunity to understand how much new infrastructure build-out costs the town. And the good thing about Joseph is that it's only 6 homes, and it's not serving any other purpose but to get those 6 people to the rest of town. And so we get to do a pretty simple math calculation as to how much are they contributing, those 6 homes, out of their property taxes, what percentage of that, or how much money goes toward streets every year, and knowing how much it costs to maintain a street, how much do we need to be setting aside? So Mr. Maglio was generous enough to provide some recent, the most up-to-date construction data on a street similar to that. Essentially, annually, we would need to be setting aside just over $6,000 to maintain that, so that by the next life cycle, after 30 years, taking the high estimate, we'd be able to replace it. We need to be setting aside $6,000. Currently, calculating the property taxes and what percentage of that goes to streets in town, those 6 houses pay $336. So that's $5,779 short every year just for that 0.15 miles of road, which is 0.05% of the total roads in town. We're taking a near $6,000 loss just from building out that road. I say this not to say that we shouldn't accept it, because this is standard practice and the people who live there expect it to be accepted, and we should continue in that. But rather to remind us that if we continue to build out in the way that we build out, we are further indebting the rest of Franklin residents and building out our infrastructure maintenance backlog. I bring it back to 3 main things, right? If we want to continue the way that we are, either we have to pay more taxes, right? Pay, instead of $336, we need to be paying, 2,000% more taxes, or we need to be cutting services and not expecting as strong services, or we need to make sure that when we develop new development, it's on existing infrastructure. I say this all because we have Franklin for All rezoning project coming up, and this is a reminder of the importance of that project. I think actually we need to do a little of all 3 of those, but just this small piece, 0.15, is further indebting the rest of Franklin's residents and sending us in the wrong direction. Happy to accept this, but just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Councilor Frangillo. Any other councilors? Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question to town engineer. We mentioned that this road was partially in Bellingham. Has Bellingham currently accepted this as a public way?
I do not know that.
Okay, it was just a curious question, only because
No.
Mark.
Are you through?
Mark put up his.
I know he did.
Oh,
I haven't recognized him yet.
Oh.
You were still talking.
I thought he was gonna say something. I was just a curious question. The only reason I ask is because it would seem kind of silly if we were the only ones to accept half the road when the other half would still be private, and it would be wouldn't be really benefit to the street as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Sorrell.
The general practice would be, whether it's across town lines or not, to accept from the last public way, accepted way. So we wouldn't leapfrog either. You would start from the accepted way, which is Beach Street, and accept
Right.
from there. We're always very careful when we're looking at the roads, Mike and myself, to ensure that whatever we're accepting goes into roads that are already accepted.
Okay, that answers the question.
Let me ask a question.
Councilor DeLarco.
Let me ask a question. whether we accept it or not, if something happens down that road, are we responsible for it?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes. Snow, I mean,
End of question.
I mean, ultimately.
End of answer.
Yeah, I
Except
mean,
the road. Yeah.
yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the short-term issue is that for decades, there have been miscommunication and misunderstanding about private ways. You know, roads that are built today, they're designated that, it's clear, it's not usually happens anymore, but in a lot of communities, there still are private ways. It's more clear, the legal language is probably better than it was 40 years ago. So to your point, Councilor DeLurco, for the people that live there now, you know, this is about emergency services and about what kind of conceptually is common sense about snow plowing and maintenance, et cetera. I would just also note really quickly to Councilor Frangilla's points, number one, we do receive, albeit not anywhere near that cost, we do receive a Chapter 90 reimbursement for publicly accepted roads. It doesn't come close to paying for it, but it does help the overall pie grow, and the legislature, I believe, has put, I think, 300 million more into Chapter 90 due to the asphalt increase in costs and stuff, so we should get a higher percentage of the pie. And secondly and finally, I'd just say to Councilor Frangilla's point, he may be accurate about this, but those dynamics are going to change, are a massive cultural change and policy change that I think state and local leaders have to consider and has to embed into the planning board and permitting processes in the future about what is proper mitigation of a project. And that's a complicated conversation. I know you know it is. But for the people that are there now, Councilor DeLurco nails it. It's really about emergency services.
Right, that's it.
Thank you. Councilor Cormier-Ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for my own clarification. By accepting these as public ways, do we also take on any existing sidewalks? Or is it just the street itself?
No, it's a pub,
Go ahead.
whatever the layout was, it depends. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's sidewalks down there.
I don't think there is.
I don't think so.
On any of them that we're talking about
It
tonight?
varies, it varies. It depends what was approved by the planning board in the first place.
Okay.
There may be sidewalks on both sides. It's what you're accepting is a layout. And then within that layout is certain improvements, roadway, utility lines, easements that service it. It's a package and it varies from one particular project to another.
Okay, so it
If there were sidewalks, it would be included in this case, we don't
Okay.
believe there are.
okay, so to Councilor Frangilla's point, then the math actually gets a little bit worse.
If there's a sidewalk.
Right, because sidewalks then become, and again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it or that we shouldn't pay for it, but that becomes an added expense that we now have to take into account.
Except that sidewalks and alternate means of transportation, so they've got a plus to them as well.
That just adds to our $160 million backlog of infrastructure projects for the town. But it's great that we keep pointing this out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cormier-Ledger. Any other comments from the council? Anyone in the audience? Attorney Sorrell.
Without dragging this out, I would like to point out that this particular one is a success story, because this is one that was there before
Right.
I got there. The original developer had defaulted essentially.
We made money on that.
There was a bank account, but the developer's name was on it with the town, and the developer would not sign off. Ultimately, another developer came by that needed that roadway for frontage, and Mike was able to negotiate a deal that got us the money released, made some improvements, so it was a win-win all the way around.
All set? Okay, Susan's Way and a portion of Lawrence Drive. Questions or comments from the council? Questions or comments from the audience? Jamie, anything to add?
Nope.
Okay, I will close the public hearings on Joseph Circle, Susan's Way, and a portion of Lawrence Drive. Okay, moving forward. Next item is presentation and discussion, FY '21 Annual Financial Audit, Melanson and Heath. Jamie.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. The time has come. I want to first introduce Scott McIntyre. Scott, thank you for your patience and making it through this entire meeting tonight. And I am incredibly impressed. Right when the audit was announced, the video came on. He was ready to go. I wasn't sure where anybody was anymore, but Scott, I really appreciate it. And I just want to first congratulate Scott and Melanson on completing this audit. You know, this is a story that doesn't get told, and it is worth telling really quickly. You know, I think every sector during COVID has been impacted significantly with transportation of documents and scanning and new ways of communicating, boxes and boxes of documents. And I just want to commend the finance staff here in town, Chris Sandini's office, as well as the treasurer collectors, and Melanson for their incredible diligence at trying to get all of the proper documentation to everybody in a very tense year. And so without further ado, I think Alicia's put the audit up on the screen so folks at home can follow along to the narrative. And I will now pass it over to Scott and his staff at Melanson and Heath to go through the fiscal year 21 annual financial audit. How you doing, Scott?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you, Jamie and Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council. Thank you for the invite to come on this evening and walk through the results of our audit of your June 30, 2021 financial statements. I'm going to say a couple of things, but maybe to help Alicia out a little bit. Alicia, I'm going to begin with page 1, which is our independent auditors report. Before I touch base on that, auditing standards really require us to communicate, with those charged with governance. In this case, it's the Town Council in Franklin. Just a little bit about how the audit went, and very pleased to be able to report to you folks once again that our audit of your financial statements went very well. What that really means, that I think of it in the most basic terms, is that when we came in, we found the books and records to be in good working order, and as a result of that, we did not need to propose any significant audit entries as a result of the procedures we performed. Audit standards also require us to communicate a discussion with you about generally accepted accounting principles, and pleased to be able to report that there were no disagreements between the town of Franklin and our firm on how to apply generally accepted accounting principles. And really the last of the 3 required communications deals with accounting estimates in your financial statements, and there's several in there. The largest of which are your estimated liabilities for your net pension OPEB, and I kind of botched that. How about your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability? I kind of blended the 2 together there. Sorry about that, folks. But your net pension liability and your net OPEB liability and some of the related deferred accounts. That I'll speak about those 2 liabilities in a moment. Other significant estimates deal with estimated allowance for doubtful accounts and useful lives of capital assets and things like that. But on the large ones, the actuarially determined ones, the pension and OPEB, they are actuarially determined by experts in that field. You've reviewed, as we have, all of the assumptions behind those estimates, and we agree with those. I'll speak a little bit more about them, but there are standards behind those estimates as well. And so with that, if I could begin on page 1 of the report, and I don't have it up on a screen here, but I should, there it is right there. Then I'm going to go, oh yeah, this is our independent auditor's report. It goes on for 3 pages. I'm not going to walk through it in a tremendous amount of detail. In essence, what it says is that, in our opinion, based on the procedures we've applied, and we've applied the procedures required by 2 sets of auditing standards, generally accepted auditing standards and generally accepted government auditing standards. And based on those procedures, in our opinion, your financial statements are prepared in materially fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Nothing new here. This is the same opinion the town's received for many, many years, but it's important to talk about each year that the results of the audit are a clean opinion on your financial statements and that they are materially presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. I'm going to skip all the way over to page 17 of the document. in this, I'm gonna skip over management's discussion and analysis, and jump, management's discussion and analysis attempts to put into words some of the results of operations. Alicia, I probably gave you the wrong page. It's a couple of pages prior to that. I skipped over management's discussion and analysis. That's a great resource to go back to at a later point in time to understand why certain key account balances may have changed. Now, the page that's up on the screen for viewing here is the second page of your statement of net position. The prior page in this is the asset side of your equation, and the page that was just up is the liabilities and net position of your governmental activities and business type activities. I start on this page. We're going to get to the general fund, which is the primary operating fund of the town, in just a moment. But we don't think any conversation about a local government's financial statements would be complete without looking at some of the long-term liabilities, particularly net pension liability and the net OPEB liability. So if we focus just for a moment in that first column of numbers, almost in the middle of the page, you see your net pension liability, again, in that first column of numbers, of about $38.8 million. Okay? Now, again, that's your proportional share, Franklin's proportional share of the Norfolk County Retirement System's unfunded liability. A couple of real key points with respect to that account balance. A year ago, that account balance had a balance of $44 million. So it's actually gone down significantly from the prior year. And it's gone down from the prior year predominantly because the investment earnings of the fund exceeded expectations. Now, with respect to investment earnings on the fund, I think it's important to point out, as is disclosed in your footnotes, that the fund is using a discount rate. It's a fancy way of saying what you expect the future earnings to be, using a discount rate of 7.75%. I will tell you that PERAC, which is the state oversight agency, is a little bit concerned that could be a little bit high. I understand that, but I think one thing that Franklin can point to support that assumption is that to date, life to date, that is, the earnings have actually exceeded that 7.75 estimated amount. So while PERAC's concerned about it, it certainly is. The results have been achievable through this audit. Now, back on about halfway down the first column of numbers, you had your net OPEB liability with an account balance of almost $68.7 million. That account balance is also down from the prior year. A year ago, that account balance had a liability of $71 million. So it's gone down about $3 million. And excuse me. And the reason for the reduction primarily is experience gains. Claims were not as high as were estimated in the budgeting. I won't say budgeting process. Claims were not as high as expected for the pool as a whole. So both of those key account balances, they're certainly large numbers, but I think it's important to point out on the pension liability, the Norfolk County system is about 70% funded. This is not I did not look up statistics on this, but I work with a lot of plans in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the fact that it's 70% funded is very highly funded. It's much higher than a lot of systems we work with. And back on the OPEB liability for a moment, you're about 12% funded. Well, that may not seem like a lot. It actually is compared to a lot of your peer communities. You put in a fair amount of money into your OPEB trust fund on an annual basis. And I know from speaking with your finance director, that certainly has been a strong attribute from a rating agency standpoint. So while those certainly are big numbers, I did want to try to put them in a little bit of context to say that, that pension liability is really 70% funded, and I think it's scheduled to be fully funded by around 2032. And the OPEB liability is about 12% funded, which exceeds a lot of your peer communities. And with that, if we could go forward over just a couple of pages, I think it would take us to page 19. Transition the conversation about your financial statements from the last page really was long-term perspective. This is your governmental funds, and we're really going to focus on the first column of numbers, which is your general fund. And this balance sheet is prepared on, technically it's called the modified accrual basis of accounting. pretty similar to cash. There's a little few cash basis. There's a few differences, but I wanted to point that out so that you have the perspective that this is a short-term perspective balance sheet. It also, this page, and specifically the third number up from the bottom in that first column of numbers, generally speaking, that's the first place that most readers are going to turn to. They're going to look at your unassigned fund balance, and for the town of Franklin, as of June 30, 2021, it had an account balance of $14.3 million. As a point of reference, that represents about 11% of your fiscal year 21 expenditures. Also, as a point of reference, last year that key account balance, that unassigned fund balance, was about $11.2 million. So you see a nice increase in that key account balance. A year ago, you had $11.2 million in that key account, which represented 9.1, and you see a several $1 million increase up to the account balance of 14.3, representing 11%. One more piece of information on that unassigned fund balance. Should be looked at that one account should just be thought of as the combination of two numbers. Included in that is the town's general stabilization funds, not its capital stabilization funds, but its general stabilization accounts. Massachusetts Department of Revenue rules require you to keep your general fund and your general stabilization fund separate. However, generally accepted accounting principles require them to be put together. So if you look at that $14.3 million, it's really made up of your unassigned fund balance in your general fund, which is the starting point for the Department of Revenue to certify your free cash, of about $6.6 million, and your general stabilization accounts of about $7.7 million. And those add up to the combined $14.3 million that you see in that account. There is a footnote that details the components of that 14.4. So if I went through that fairly quickly, there is a footnote that describes the components of those two account balances in there. And really, that's really there's actually one more page I wanted to turn to. If we could go over to page 24 of the document. I just wanted to point out your OPEB trust fund. A couple more pages, Alicia. One more, please. This one right here. I spoke earlier about how you had several $1 million, into your OPEB trust fund. That's that first column of numbers here on this page, and the number at the very bottom of that of $9.8 million. That's the amount in your trust fund for OPEB benefits as of 6/30/21. And I'd like to point out one other component here, and that is, you're adding. That account balance went up by $3 million. It's the third number up from the bottom. Okay, and that's a nice increase into your trust fund. It comes from two reasons. One, you have about $2 million in investment earnings on the portfolio. So 6/30/21 and for the year that ended was a very good year for your portfolio of assets in your trust fund. In addition to the investment earnings, you put in about $1 million, essentially coming from the general fund, to add $3 million to the trust fund. And that balance of 9.8 is helping to permit you to use a higher discount rate than other communities may be able to use that don't have significant assets in their trust funds, in their OPEB trust fund. You're actually using a discount rate of 7.5%. We work with some communities that are only permitted to use about a little over 2%. If there's not sufficient assets in their OPEB trust fund. So I wanted to point that out because OPEB is a big issue with respect to governmental fund financial statements these days. And not only is there $9.8 million in there, you added $3 million. A lot of it has to do with solid investment earnings, plus the contribution that you make from the general fund. And I think it's very important to point out that the portfolio you have there is what's permitting you to use a discount rate of 7.5%. If you only had, let's say, half of that in your portfolio. I did not do that. That's not a statistically sound number, but if it was something significantly less than 9.8, you would have a much lower discount rate and therefore a much higher net OPEB liability that we saw on your long-term prospective financial statements. That's a very, very quick walkthrough of our audit of your financial statements. I will turn it back to the council chair and try to answer any questions that the council may have at this point in time.
Thank you. Love great reports like that. Questions or comments from the council? Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McIntyre, thank you. I know this sounds really odd to people, but I actually look forward to these audit reports every single year. I really do. And the reason that is because of how remarkable of a job the town of Franklin does to manage its books, to manage its accounts. And the reports that come back every single year from Ellison just speaks loads about how efficient our town government runs. I mean, kudos to our treasury and our administration in regards to managing the books and managing the money. It's just, I've learned so much sitting in this seat about how budgets and accounts and all of this works. Honestly, if it wasn't for this position, I wouldn't know all of this. And I think having read these reports many times over now and having heard such great reviews from Ellison about the way the town of Franklin does their business, I just want to thank you for coming in once again and giving such a great statement in regards to the town. And I just want to put forth to the citizens that your dollars are being used wisely. And I think Tom can pretty much agree with me, Bobby can agree with me, going back several years now, that we were kind of in a scare when it came to the OPEB funding.
Yeah.
So now that we're really in this kind of, as you would put it so eloquently, great position comparatively to our peers, that just makes me so proud. And that's a testament to our town and our government and how well it's run. Other than that, I just want to thank you for your time tonight, coming to the council and presenting this report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Jones. Councilor Frangillo.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I'm interested, still learning more about this whole process. Where does infrastructure fall within our accounting? Where do our roads and pipes fall?
I'm not gonna, if Alicia can, it looks like she's getting something back up on the screen. This would be page 13 of the document, Alicia. And while she's turning to that, when I turned and spoke earlier of your long-term perspective balance sheet, I went to the side of the equation which included the liabilities and equity, if you will, to talk about pension and OPEB. I skipped over this page, but really this is, of course, the asset side of the equation. And towards the bottom of this page, you see one of the largest numbers there that isn't a total or a subtotal is the other capital assets net of accumulated depreciation of a little over $206 million. That's really where the infrastructure would be included. It's in your capital assets. So your roads and other things like that, as well as buildings and what have you, would be included in that $206 million.
Great, so it's entirely on our assets side. I guess we as a town would see that as something that needs to be continued to be funded and maintained at some high cost. Does the accounting sheet consider quality of roads and services?
Yeah, well, Franklin, like most governments, use a traditional capital asset accounting model. The standards do allow for, they call it the modified approach, where you would have to measure the quality of those assets on a regular basis. But again, like Franklin, like virtually all of our clients, uses the traditional model of reporting them at essentially their net book value, historical cost minus depreciation. So it is. I pointed these numbers out because that's where the infrastructure assets are on your financial statements. But it's a little hard just to look at that number and determine the quality of the asset compared to, replacing them, what it would cost to replace. That's really not what the model, the generally accepted accounting principles, the model of it is designed to do. One could look, but this is a little bit of a stretch, but I hear this a lot, so I'll share it with you in the council, is that a lot of times governments will look at their depreciation expense, which I can point to that in a moment, and they may measure what they're putting in for assets or new infrastructure compared to the infrastructure that's being depreciated. Is there a little bit of a matching or kind of a replacement of the infrastructure that's being depreciated? That is a way it can be looked at it, but it's not the simplest model to use.
Is it fair to say that this is a statement of our ability to pay future debts in a timely manner more than our ability to continue to provide the quality services that our residents enjoy?
I'm sorry, could you just ask that one more time? I'll be happy to try to answer it.
I guess the quality of our fiscal health in this sense, we were just talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure backlog. That's not captured in here. When we say that we're fiscally healthy, it's my understanding that that's in, if we take on more debt, we can pay it off in a timely manner. Is that?
Yes, I think that's true. One of the key footnotes that's in your financial statements, highlights all of your long-term debt. And more specifically, it shows you when it's going to be paid off. And one of the key attributes that rating agencies and fiscal and financial institutions look at is how rapidly you're paying off your outstanding bonds. And Franklin, I think, I don't have the percentage in front of me, but I know we looked at it during the audit. Rating agencies like to see, around between 65 and 70% of your long-term debt being paid off over the next 10 years. They recognize it's not all going to be paid off over the next 10 years, but they want to see governments, having between 65 or 70 or potentially higher paid off in the next 10 years. And I'm quite sure that Franklin, your amortization of your long-term debt fits into that model just fine.
I appreciate it. And I'm very happy, as we all are, that these continue to come back strong. I just don't want to kid ourselves and say that this means that we're able to continue to fund the services at a sustainable level. I'm talking about roads and infrastructure, but also schools that we continue to sort of underfund, each year. Right? This is not a quality. This is not a statement on, the quality of our ability to, reach level services, but rather our ability to pay our bills.
I agree with that. It's a snapshot as of a balance sheet date of 6/30/21, and the operating statements show the operating results for the 12-month period or fiscal period ended June 30, 21.
Thank you.
Jamie?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So, Councilor Fragillo, to your point, at the end of the day, financial audits, just like all of the other work we do financially, the audit really is a reflection on the fiscal year and how our accounting, our practices, all the way down to ethics questions, a whole variety of stuff is brought forth to validate from an independent third party that the town of Franklin is doing a great job, and in terms of managing its money, reporting, et cetera. The reason why that's important, to your point, is not necessarily around our ability to pay or the quality of infrastructure, but what it does is it feeds into the narrative at the ratings agency that Scott's referenced many times, which fully gets back to the importance of managing these things so well that we get the best bond rating we can, because that end up has the effect on allowing us to have the cash flow and the fiscal strength with investors to be able to make those investments and be able to pay them off with a lot of confidence from the private sector, lending institutions, financial, blah, 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 blah. And so I just want to but I want to make sure the public is at home watching that this isn't really related to taxes or, our ability to spend or our ability to pay. Those are points that are a little bit off to the side, indirectly connected. But I just want to make sure the public understands this is really a review of our financial practices, policies, effectiveness. And I think to Scott's point, we've been getting high marks for many, many years. That's what bond rating agencies really want to see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jamie. All set, Councilor
All set,
Frangillo.
yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Cormier Ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. Normally, with my nonprofit background, I would see concerns raised in a management letter that would accompany an audit, and I don't see any here. So am I reading it correctly that not only are we in good shape, but to your professional opinion, you're not even finding areas that you feel the town should focus on, or that are maybe an area that needs some addressing in the future, something like that?
That's correct. Standards require us to report any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, and we did not identify any material weaknesses in accordance with our audit.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Councilor DeLoco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Scott, just kind of curious, do you have any idea when the Norfolk County retirement will be fully funded?
I believe it's 2032.
I thought it was 30, but that's why I was wondering, was it 32 that it will be? Okay. Thank you, just curious.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Scott, thank you very much. We love getting these reports, as Councilor Jones said. We've been here quite a number of years, and getting these reports on an annual basis really is a tribute to the entire town government. Right down every single department, right up through the council, because we're setting the policies and the department heads running the departments. And it's just one of those occasions where we all should just tap ourselves on the back and say, nice job. And it goes all the way down to every single department in our town. Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, moving on. Legislation for action. Resolution 22-26, acceptance of easement of property at 732 Washington Street. Clerk will read the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is 2272, correct? 2227.
I'm sorry. Did I read the wrong one? I'm sorry.
That's okay. 2227, order of acceptance.
Yeah,
Joseph
2227, sorry. Order of acceptance of Joseph Circle as a public way and related utility and drainage easement.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Resolution 2227, order acceptance of Joseph Circle as a public way and related utilities and drainage easements. Whereas the General Court enacted Chapter 163 of Legislative Acts of 2011, an act providing a simplified procedure for municipal acceptance of subdivision roads in a city known as the Town of Franklin, herein known as Chapter 163. And whereas Joseph Circle is laid out in constructed road and residential subdivision shown on definitive subdivision plan approved by the Town of Franklin Planning Board and recorded on Norfolk County Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 407 and Plan Number 419 of 1992. Whereas the town has fully complied with the requirements of Chapter 163 for municipal acceptance of said road as public way, said compliance includes submittal of written certification of plans by the Town of Franklin Planning Board to the Franklin Town Council, and the Franklin Town Council is holding a public hearing this date after hearing given prior written notice thereof to the owner of the record of each property abutting the road as evidenced by the abutters list, a true copy of which is attached hereto as Exhibit A, and noticed by newspaper publication. Now, therefore be it ordered, the Town Council of the Town of Franklin determines that it is in the public interest to accept Joseph Circle, shown in the above referenced definitive subdivision plan as Guernsey Street, and also shown on the street acceptance plan entitled Street Layout and Acceptance Plan of Joseph Circle, prepared by CGC Associates Incorporated of Wilmington, Massachusetts, and dated February 11th of 2022, to be recorded herewith as a public way. In accordance with the said determination, the Franklin Town Council hereby accepts the following road shown on said street acceptance plan as a public way and fee ownership thereof to vest in town. Joseph Circle for its entire length, together with ownership of the following drain easement shown in the above referenced street acceptance plan. Drainage easement shown as detention basement easement between lots 4 and 5, and along rear lot line of number 5 and 3, the Franklin Town Council directs that a true copy of this order of acceptance, together with the original above referenced street acceptance plan, be recorded by the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds within 30 days in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 163. This resolution shall become effective according to the provisions of the Town of Franklin Home Rule Charter.
Move resolution 22-27.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Jamie?
Just through you, Mr. Chairman, the next two resolutions are to accept the streets that we just had the hearing about. All set.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion to approve Resolution 22-27. A two-thirds majority votes required. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 22-28, order of acceptance of Susan's Way and a portion of Lawrence Drive as public ways and related utility and drainage easements. Clerk will read the resolution.
Motion to waive the reading?
Second.
Motion is second to waive the reading. All those in favor of waiving the reading signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move resolution 22-28.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Jamie, anything?
Nothing.
Councilors? Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion to approve Resolution 22-28. Again, a two-thirds majority votes required. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaw Amendment 22-879, Chapter 170, Vehicles and Traffic, Appendix A, Fines, Parking Violations, first reading. Clerk will read the bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A bylaw amendment to Code of the Town of Franklin in Chapter 170 Vehicles and Traffic, Appendix A, Fines. Be it enacted by the Franklin Town Council that Chapter 170 Vehicles and Traffic, Appendix A, Fines of the Code of the Town of Franklin is amended as follows. This has to do with parking violations. As noted below, it's going to be restricted prohibited areas, $25. Parking within 10 feet of the hydrant, entrance to a fire station, $50. Obstruction to a driveway, $25. Obstruction of a crosswalk, $25. Obstruction of a sidewalk, $25. All night parking when restricted, $25. Snow removal, $25. Wrong direction, $25. Double parking, $25. Taxi stand, $25. Bus stop, $25. Parking within 20 feet of an intersection is $25. A posted handicap parking space is going from 125 to 150. Meter overtime parking is going from 15 to 25. Overtime parking is going from 15 to 35, it's proposed. And improper parking is going from 15 to 25. And unauthorized parking, $50. Bylaw amendment shall become effective on and after July 1st of 2022. This is a first reading, Mr. Chairman.
Move resolution 22-879
To a second reading.
to a second reading.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Jamie?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so as I've outlined, and I'll try to synthesize as quickly and easily as possible, the bylaw, first reading before everybody tonight. If folks are at home, there is a memo. The list is up there, but there is a memo in the packet that explains the history of this. and that this was largely brought forth over the last several years to address some parking issues. And I'm just focusing right now, by the way, on this bylaw, not the next bylaw amendment on the parking zoning map in downtown. That's a different bylaw, and we can talk about that then. But there's been concerns about scofflaws at times. We've worked with the residents on West Street for just about 4 years now. The DPW and police have done an incredible job trying to attain and define the problem on West Street, and that there are a couple of sections near the college dorm where there is going to be some additional striping, but with the one of the identified issues was the fact that Dean College does have a fee per semester to park there as a student. And we do know that most students take advantage of that, but they also have friends that come from other places. And so with a $15 ticket is not necessarily really a disincentive to try to not have to pay for parking, park far away. And when you can park right across the street illegally and get away with it, that seems to be the modus operandi of some folks at the school. Our staff have worked with Dean for years on this. They have made a lot of improvements. I know many of you on the council are familiar with those. They've changed their parking lot structure. They've asked staff and students to park in different places to alleviate the problem. Our DPW has put in line striping parking spaces up and down East, West, Church, Walnut, and other, Nason, I believe, as well. And so we've been trying to work on this. I think all of you on the council are familiar with the concerns of people on West Street. Some of you I know live there. But in all sincerity, you know, for weeks and months of debate, the consensus was that we should try to look at increasing the traffic violation penalty to try to disincentivize kids from parking illegally, or other residents, by the way. It's certainly not just the Dean College students. And to take advantage of the free spaces up and down West Street. There's plenty of parking up and down West Street. And so originally we were talking about the numbers and saying, well, geez, if there's a $175 a semester fee to park, well, at $50 a violation, maybe that would be 3 strikes, and maybe we would get the kids to park back in the parking lot and avoid these issues. And as the police department always does, an incredibly thorough job, we went to look in through Lieutenant Riley and Chief Lynch, who are here tonight, to answer questions and discuss this as well. They went around and did a consensus of almost a dozen towns around of us and looked at their ticket books, okay? And decided to see what are other towns charging for the same violations. They presented a report to the EDC a few weeks ago with a recommendation, all of which you see here. Some violations stay the same. Some have been increased based on our research. A nominal amount of $10 in almost every category. Obviously, the handicap parking being raised $25. Probably isn't raising too many eyebrows, but all the rest of them are fairly reasonable increase, or a modest increase, I should say, of about $10. With the one exception, as noted in my memo, the Economic Development Committee of the Council did vote 3-1 to move this forward as is to the full council. They did amend the overtime parking section on there from $15 to $35. And so the proposal's before everybody tonight. Happy to obviously answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. And the Chief of Police and Lieutenant Riley are both here to also answer any questions that the citizens or the council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Councilor Hamblin, since you're the EDC chair, would you like to speak first?
I would like to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you, Jamie, for that concise explanation about what happened. We've been talking about this for months, but first I want to thank Chief Lynch and Lieutenant Riley. They took a list of problems that we gave them, and they spent tons of time and energy in researching the issue, studying the solutions, and bringing us this resolution and the next one that that will be up next, to help us solve the problems. There are overtime, overnight parking in a no parking area in multiple areas around town, not just the east-west street. And so during the discussions about the parking violations, we learned that these these fines have not been updated or looked at since 2002. So that means it's been 20 years since, bless you, it's been 20 years since anyone has updated these or looked at them. And I hope that we can all agree that $15 just doesn't deter anyone. You know, we discussed this list, and with one exception, we agreed to all the fines that Lieutenant Riley has suggested here. And the discussion was about the overtime, which is up to 35. So some people wanted no fine. We had people that wanted $50 or $100 for a fine. And I really think that this is a good compromise that we have come up with, and it was our job to go through this and come up with a compromise to recommend to the council tonight. You know, some communities have higher or lower fines depending on where their pain point is. And I think most of our problems have come from this overstay of the 2-hour limit. And so I think that's why I thought we should bump it up a little bit, because that has been our pain point. So I want to thank Lieutenant Riley again for his patience and his incredible work and to help us solve these problems. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Hamblin. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a note in regards to the numbers that are listed here from the lieutenant. The original number was 25, and it was changed to 35 at request of the EDC council, and it did go through 3-1 on the $35. I was the one that was a dissension on the $35 in the sense that I'd like to keep it at the original request of the lieutenant of $25, for the simple fact, well, for two reasons. There's actually two things in regards to this that I'd like to speak to. One is that making these fines, and I understand it's been 20 years since we've addressed this issue, and it's valid that we definitely go forth and address these fines, especially since it's been so long. One is, and I agree with the fact that the lieutenant went around to our fellow communities and looked at what an average fine goes for these types of violations. They are in line, as so mentioned during the EDC meeting, except my point is that with the $25, is that, yes, these violations have not been addressed in 20 years, but it doesn't mean that just because we haven't addressed them in the past 20 years, that if a violation we approve tonight, we find that it may not be enough to have remedied the issue, then we always have an opportunity to readdress this issue again within a short amount of time. We can always bring this up, for instance, say next year, if this is not working out as expected, we can always increase it or adjust it as necessary. What I'm getting at is I would hate to put us in a position where we're setting a price too high, where we would deter vehicular traffic from visiting our downtown and visiting our businesses. Another thing in regards to the parking is I think 2 hours, in essence, is a really short window of time for many people to actually effectively visit the overall amount of businesses that are downtown. I think 3 hours might be more reasonable, where, for instance, if you go to Gallagher's, if they're busy, or if somebody just wants to hang around for a while, or if somebody wants to try to traverse the triangle and go to many of the businesses that are in the triangle, that could take close to 2 hours, if not more than 2 hours, which would jeopardize the person getting a ticket, not at their own accord, not intentionally, that may deter them from visiting the downtown. So it's kind of a balancing act on both how much the fine should be, as well as the amount of time necessary for a person to effectively traverse the downtown. I think 3 hours would probably be better, and I think starting at 25 would be a good deterrent. That's my opinion, sir.
Thank you, Counselor Jones. Counselor DeLorco.
Thank you. I kind of totally agree with Counselor Jones. I do think that if we go up on these, we're gonna hurt our downtown, and that's what we're trying to get back. I think you can go up $1,000 on that. If you don't get Dean off their ass, you're not gonna get anything done. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Counselor DeLorco. Counselor Pellegri.
Thank you, through the chair. It says over here, meter overtime. Is someone coming up here to answer questions?
No?
No?
Well,
It says meter overtime.
Jamie.
I think if you're over the meter.
Pardon?
There are, I'm.
We have no meters.
I'm well aware of that. I mean, geez. You think I missed that one? I think if I can, just give me a second here. Before people allege the TA doesn't know there's no meter. So part of this is we have a parking lot behind Dean Bank with so much parking, it's never filled with anyone. And eventually what we're gonna do because of the pandemic, and you know, it's just one of those things where we're at that point where we can entertain this project, is as we've stated at the EDC meeting, and as we've talked to the chief, I've already spoken to him and met with his staff a couple of times, we're out looking for a new system to utilize the parking behind Dean Bank. That parking was always commuter and merchant parking. It still is. It's in the town bylaw. The town bylaw needs to change. There are no commuters anymore. Whether that's good news or bad news, whether we'll resuscitate it someday,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't see commuting coming back this summer, for example, to the way it was 3 summers ago.
No.
We've gotten a lot of inquiries from people that said, well, we want to park there for a week, or I have to go into Boston for a month, or I just want to park there for the day. And right now, the lot is only set aside for commuters in the morning. And then all afternoon and all weekend long, it is free parking for everybody to enjoy in downtown. Free. But we've gotten so many inquiries, Councilor Pellegri, over why can't I park there for a day? I'm not a commuter. I just da-da-da-da. That we have to have the police and the staff go through an extensive process to evaluate whether we are ever going to put meters back in. They're not going to ever look like the old meters where you put in a dime and a quarter and whatnot. But we're going to go back and look at the products of having sticker-based system, like $1 a day or something of that sort. And so we're proposing not to take out the meter overtime because at some point in the future, it's likely that will need to be either revised again and updated the terminology, or we may have to leave it in there. So if we do come up with a system where someone parks in a space, all day, and then they try to park overnight or whatever, the police can go offer a ticket to make sure that scofflaw is held accountable. So that's the reason why we're not proposing to take out the meter overtime yet, despite the fact that there are no meters again in the sidewalks in downtown. I hope that answers the question.
But it's a good idea to keep it in here, you're saying.
Exactly, yes.
I don't. Okay, and secondly, it says overtime parking. How do we check to see if it's overtime parking?
Chief?
Right now, it's a 2-hour limit, so the officers go by. It starts at, some of them are 8 in the morning, 8 to 2. So you go by at 8:10, you go back again at 10:10, car's still there, it's overtime parking, $35, or whatever you guys decide to do.
Okay, but I mean, if someone is 10 minutes late coming in to check the cars, they may not be overtime parking.
We're pretty good, but I'm not
No,
gonna say
you
that
are
we're gonna
very
be there
good.
every 2 hours on the
You are
hours.
very good,
But
but-
if we get there 2 hours and 50 minutes later and the car's still there, so be it. If they beat us. If we get there 2 hours and 50 minutes from the first check, and they left 2 hours and 30 minutes, they got us. We weren't able to go there. We try, we'll do the best we can. But that could happen. But if they're there longer, then obviously they're gonna get the fine. And that's what the overtime parking is. And Jamie was right, the metered overtime, if we ever put it back, because we're gonna have to have new books made up, and we just kinda talked about how long is that gonna be, depending on what you decide to, eventually, we're gonna have to have the books, what are we gonna do? We'll have to cross out the old fine, write in the new fine for the time being.
Yeah, right.
We will be making a bunch of books, and we just didn't wanna have to do it again if we do have a meter type of system, whatever it may look like.
Oh, I get that. That makes sense.
Okay.
All set, Council Pellegrini? Councilor Cormier Ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question really comes to the all-night parking when restricted, only going up $10. That was a huge issue that came before us with the folks from those streets that were talking about, cars being where they weren't supposed to be overnight. So can someone just explain to me the rationale of that only going up $10? Because that doesn't seem like a deterrent to me.
Again, the
Through
research.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe, the overtime, and I was confused on this too for a while, so, I had to check in with the chief. Overtime parking, Councilor Cormier Ledger, is where the violation is that's happening on that street. It's not the all-night parking when restricted. It's a different violation. Am I accurate with that, chief?
Yes.
Okay.
But
what is the all-night parking when restricted?
There isn't any until you vote on this to have the areas that you're going to end up putting in. At one time, there might have been, but right now, there is no overnight parking restrictions.
Oh, there's none, right?
But I know it was brought to our attention before that the dean students are sometimes circumventing the system by parking in the same spot overnight, right? I mean, I remember that came up from people that live in that neighborhood. So this really doesn't, at least in my opinion, address that too much. If a kid does it, he's going to get whacked with a $25 fine, which may in fact still be cheaper if he gets caught, right? So was just curious. It was the only one up there that I saw that I'm like, that's really not enough of a bump to, if I'm 18, I might risk it, right? But just curious.
But just so everybody's clear, these are town-wide. So it's not just that one street, it's not just, it's town-wide. These bylaws take effect town-wide. So there may be other times where a truck is parked illegally in a no parking zone, there might be other dynamics with that. But as the chief pointed out, there right now currently is no, and the next bylaw proposal addresses this with the one strip on East Central Street and Main Street. But right now, there is no overnight parking restrictions in our town code. There may have been years and years and decades ago, I don't know. But that's probably a fine or a violation that's been in town code. We haven't updated or even looked at these in 20 years. I can't imagine how far back some of these types of violations go back. But we do know that they're consistent across other communities because we did the research and the same categories exist in virtually every town around here. So it's not like this verbiage is incorrect. It does mean something.
And it does, just my next point really, it does sound like it's somewhat of an education issue, right? Because we heard that there were employees violating the 2-hour policy in front of their storefronts as well, where it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, those same employees could park behind the bank, walk to their place of business without a problem.
After 2 o'clock.
Right? So while to Councilor Jones's point earlier, we definitely want to encourage people staying longer than 2 hours to enjoy the businesses and get a bite to eat, but at the same time, we have an issue with employees parking directly in front and taking some of those prime spots. Right? Okay.
Greg. Quickly.
Through Mr. Chair, that's accurate. And that's also the impetus for the bylaw proposal on the next one.
Okay.
And just quickly, the most common situation the chief would reference is, I have a car parked right outside in front of my business in a 2-hour zone. The car has been there for 4 hours. Can the police come down and do something about this? I want to assure everybody, we're not roaming around, driving up or down, circling around, targeting cars at hours and times. The teeth in this really gives the police the ability to deal with egregious situations. We're not walking around at 2 hours and 10 minutes like the city of Boston, the city of Los Angeles, the city of New York, city of Cambridge. We're not doing that. It's really for the issue that you just brought up, which is I got a car, 4 hour, 5 hours, whether it's a business owner, a Dean College student, an employee, a citizen, a neighbor resident, a visitor. It really just gives them the ability to go down and to be able to ticket the car. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cormier-Ledger. Anybody else? I guess my only comment before I go to the audience is I tend to agree with, I can't believe I'm saying this, Councilor Jones and Councilor DeLorco. And I like the original proposal brought forth by Lieutenant Riley with the overtime parking being at $25. But that's, again, that's my opinion, my stance, where I'd like to see us. So with that, I'll go to the audience. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this issue? Please come forward. Name and address. I know you've been sitting there a while.
Thank you for waiting patiently.
Thank you all for. Steve Sherlock's out there to help you with that.
Lisa Piana, 6 Matthew Drive. I'm the Executive Director of the Franklin Downtown Partnership, and I appreciate everybody's opinion on this. This is a very important issue for the downtown businesses, the Franklin Downtown Partnership, but you know, for residents, I mean, our downtown has 6 new businesses. I think for those of you that have been downtown recently, you see more visitors down there than in many, many years. We have a new bookstore, we have a new bakery, and so we want to make sure that we continue to have visitors coming down and they're not afraid of getting ticketed. It's, for me, and from the business, I've had a chance to talk to a few businesses. Obviously, we have a few hundred members, so I haven't talked to all of them, or I don't represent all of their opinions. But the businesses I spoke to, they really brought up the town parking lots. And I know Jamie has said, you know, after 2 o'clock, you can park in the depot parking lot. And I've also heard you can park in the West Street parking lot. But there's no signs. I was just down there because I thought, everyone's telling, you know, a lot of the businesses have been saying, I don't know where this free parking is. So I'm not sure who have mentioned it, but it is an education problem, I think, and one that can be fixed pretty quickly. I mean, we can, you know, get some new signs up. I think that can happen pretty quickly. And I also, Glenn, I agree with you, like 2 hours isn't enough anymore. We have so many great businesses downtown. And I was there just last week with my daughter, and we took the whole afternoon. And we spent over an hour in the bakery, and then we went to the bookstore, and by then, we're running back, you know, my daughter's running back to move her car, and we didn't even get to the olive oil shop or the gift store. So, again, just something to think about. I think basically, 3 suggestions: better signage, education, and really looking at those lots, because I was just down there, and you're right, Jamie, there's no commuters down there. I mean, today was, you know, an average day, I guess, and I saw probably about 24, 25 open spaces down in the depot lot, and I saw, I don't know, probably like 10 or 12 in the Ferrera's West lot. So if those could be, whether it's free parking or, you know, even a nominal fee for people to park when they come to downtown for more than 2 hours, then I think then that allows people to have a choice. So, okay, I'm going to be here for longer, let me go park in one of those lots instead of just, you know, spending an hour at one of the businesses. But I also wanted to invite everyone who wants to talk about parking to the general meeting June 2nd, the Franklin Downtown Partnership. We'll have that on the agenda. And we'd love to, have a chance for our members to talk about a lot of their ideas. I talked to probably about 7 or 8 downtown businesses, and they had some great ideas about parking in general and different suggestions. I think one of the questions that just kept coming up is combining the West Street issues with issues in the downtown center. Can we look at those separately? Can we talk about
Agreed.
fines differently? Because they're very different, and we just don't want one dictating the other, just like I don't think the West Street people really want the downtown area to be dictating what's going on at West Street. They have their other issues. So hopefully that, we can get together, have some more discussion on this in the future. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience? Please, just name and address, please, Gary.
Gary McIntosh, 24 East Street, and I agree with what she had just said. Originally, what the problem was, it was the West Street, East Street, Mason, Church Ave, etc. And then what we ended up doing was combining it with the downtown Franklin parking. I mean, there's two different set of issues, and I understand that the businesses, you don't want to have somebody get ticketed when they're coming in to shop in your store. But that's different than the residential parking on East and West Street. And I'm not sure if we can decouple that. I think that may be worth a thought, and I don't want to, and I'm not saying for tonight because, it's getting late to say the least, but I'm not sure $25 is going to fix the problem with the Dean kids. Because I just did another quick calculation. They're going to have to get 14 tickets to match what it would cost them to park on the Dean parking lot. And I don't think that's going to be enough of a disincentive for them to do that, but that's just my opinion. On the survey that Lieutenant did and the Chief was involved with, did a great job. One different dynamic that Franklin has in any other surrounding town, we have a downtown college and we have a downtown MBTA station. Now the MBTA is not an issue right now, but we have a downtown college, which none of the surrounding communities have. So that's an additional pressure on our side streets. So I would like to see the $35 stay for the residential area, and I can see why the downtown area might not want that. And I think it's two separate issues, but anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please come forward, name and address, please.
April Rock, and I'm representing 12 Main Street, a new business. As Lisa said, the 2-hour minimum, while right now, as we haven't started any of our programs, it's not a problem, but as I have 20 or 30 kids coming in for a story time in the morning, the lack of parking for the morning is an issue, but also only providing 2 hours. If they want to go to breakfast, which a lot of parents do, they want to go to breakfast, they want to come to story time, they want to go to different stores while they're there, 2 hours is not going to be enough time. So that is, as a new business owner, new to Massachusetts and everything, that seems to be a really short period of time. The parking issue, I would only say if we could open up Dean in the mornings, we could have more activities happening in the morning as well, not just in the afternoon. Because if I had to have a bunch of parking people coming in for an event, author event, story times, whatever, they would have to wait until the afternoon for enough parking to help that.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Stephen Passini, here on behalf of Passini Shoe Store, 22 Main Street, downtown, merchant and longtime member of the Franklin Downtown Partnership. And really, I don't really have a lot more to add. Lisa did a great job expressing the views of the merchants. And I think, it's really just a matter of reasonableness. I think it's, with parking being at such a premium, there's always been that balance between discouraging the long-term parking, but yet encouraging the turnover, which is, obviously good for anyone utilizing downtown. So what might be initially an attempt to deter parking or long-term or overtime parking might in effect be viewed as punitive and a penalty to people. And I just think coming out of the pandemic and with the encouragement or the presence of the new businesses, the new cafe and the bookshop, that it might really just be sending the wrong message at this time if we increase the overtime parking, fine. So that would be my view, and I appreciate your consideration. And also, just want to mention if Mrs. DiMartino is still watching, congratulations. Her son Dave and I were classmates, 1978 graduates of Franklin High School, a long time ago. But, happy belated 100th birthday. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Scott Martin from Arlington Street. I also volunteer my time as president of the Franklin Downtown Partnership. I came to Franklin in 2012 and I owned a business on Main Street. So I've been a business owner on Main Street. I've been involved in the town. I'm encouraged by some of the discussion I'm hearing today about potentially a 3-hour time limit, because I do think with the variety of mix that we brought downtown, the 2 hours is really not enough time to do more than one activity. I think the kind of things that we have that are starting to make downtown unique and put it on an upswing. You have a bookstore that's going to have an art gallery inside. You've got a coin and collectible shop. You've got a comic book shop. You've got 2 coffee shops. These things, just by themselves, that have owner-operators willing to meet you, talk to you, get to know you, and engage you in conversation. It's relationship and not transactional. And I think when you do those kind of visits, meet those kind of owners, and then you want to stop and walk over to the Rome or Teddy Gallagher's to have a meal and a few drinks afterwards, 2 hours just really doesn't seem time to enjoy all of that. Plus, we have a Ladybug Trail coming. That's going to encourage people to park their car and walk to all these different kind of shops. So I really think that potentially a 3-hour window is much more conducive. And I do think that getting parking available before 2 p.m. would certainly help with that crunch and trying to find that. Good news is that if we have maybe a communication gap, I know the resources of the Franklin Downtown Partnership, we would use that along with some improved signage, but we'd use our resources to help get the word out. So just want to help you, I'm hopeful that you're considering those points, and I do understand on East and West Street the need to make sure those residents are getting what they need. But it's interesting, I would agree with Mr. Pizzini that I don't know if a $25 fine would necessarily change an 18, 19, 20-year-old's opinion. But if I go shopping and spend a couple $100s in a few of these spots, and I walk out and I get a $25 extra tax on my car, it might discourage me from doing that experience again. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last item, Eileen Mason, I'm on Beaver Street in Franklin, and in dealing with bringing a lot of businesses downtown over the last 10 years or more, one of the big complaints is there's not enough parking. There's not enough convenient parking, and it's not only just for their customers to have an easy walk to their shop, which we're getting a lot of new shops now, which is great, but it's their employees. Where do they park? I constantly see that on even Cottage Street, Caesar's Barber Shop, the pizza shop. They have a lot of employees. There's other small businesses there. There's very little room for their clients, their customers, to come in and park. So one of my thoughts has always been, why can't we take some of those spots that are at the West Central Ferraris Market lot that we lease as a town and make those available to the downtown business owners for their employees to go park there, instead of it being commuter parking. And then whatever else is left over in that lot is retail parking for the day. Get rid of the 2 hours, get rid of the 3 hours, whatever that is, it's gonna be, good, dedicated. Similar to the Depot Street area, make some of it available to, employees. The bank, Dean Bank bought a lot of land, took the building down and made their own parking lot because they needed parking. All those other businesses around there need that same kind of parking. So there's fines being proposed here, but there's not a parking plan that we can all see and agree and maybe answer some of these big questions. So we're kind of hoping that you hold off on setting out these fines and sending them out until everybody's had discussions on what to do with parking, because I know as a partnership, we've been asking for help with this for 20 years, and it's time. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, I'm Jane Curran, 18 Park Road, as you know, one of the founders of the Franklin Downtown Partnership and a former business owner in downtown. I've talked to many of you, and thank you for listening to me, and I agree with what everybody has said. But the one point about the gentleman from East Street, not combining the downtown issue with his street. And so I'm wondering about the other side streets. What about Emmons Street and Dean Ave? And since I live up on Park Road, are those streets also going to get these kinds of fines? I haven't heard about that. Is it every feeder off of this area? Okay, so basically, the 2-hour thing is really the problem, I think. I think raising them somewhat is a good idea, but 2 hours is not enough to shop downtown. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the council chambers? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak on this?
Somebody's out there.
Roberta Trahan, please.
Hi, good evening. Roberta Trahan, 1 Green Street in Franklin, also a member of the Downtown Partnership. I've agreed with everything that these speakers have said. I thank the council and especially the EDC for the work they have done. I would like to stress one additional point, and that is education. People just simply don't know where they're supposed to park. There's been a discussion of having a map that perhaps we could put up on the partnership website, but we really need signage. So whatever the decision is, let's try to educate the public. But I also agree that we probably need a little bit more discussion on this before you vote in these fines. Thank you very much, as always, for your time.
Thank you. Jamie?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a couple quick points. Number one, there are in town code 24 spaces that are dedicated towards merchant parking. They are clearly signed. I've gone out and looked at them. The sign's right there in the spaces. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, 2 years have gone by and we've not sold one space to a merchant. And Lieutenant Riley and the chief are saying for 2 years, those 24 spaces, no takers. And I understand that, and for people that, but in all fairness, I got here in 2016 and early 16, and the town bylaw was changed based off advocacy for more merchant parking. And the remaining spaces were for commuters, because there was a balance that had to be made, and many of you that were here at that time, Council Mercer, DeLorco, Jones, Plague, you know, we knew the debate was heavy about who gets what. And number two, I would just say we've had a parking map for downtown. It's not, I'm not going to try to make it and pitch it as the most sellable, best promotional material that's ever come out before. But we included it in the packet. I know the partnership has sent it out to folks, and I just don't think those are necessarily the issues that we're dealing with. There is merchant parking in downtown Franklin dedicated for merchants, and we don't have takers. I'm assuming that as of now, part of that is because, you know, the COVID pandemic, you know, people split up or whatever, and I understand the rate is higher than it probably should be for today's marketplace. But at the time, the discussion from the council was very fragmented and a difficult one on, well, how do you charge a commuter $180 a quarter and give a discount to a business or charge a business more than a commuter? And so the council unanimously made a decision to say we're going to charge the same rate for everybody. And so I think part of it might be education. And I was just out west, and I happened to be in a downtown, which I didn't know. And there is signage pointing you on Dean Bank that says parking this way. There is a sign right there. The one word missing from that sign, and I've already asked Brutus to change it, is putting the word free above parking. Now that's not entirely accurate because it's not free yet, because we have in town code that law is for commuters and for merchants. which we do intend to look at. But I also worry about the times of, are we gonna do free parking? Can we afford to do free parking? Or do we charge for an all-day, $1 for a whole day, and what's the cost of that? So we have some challenging decisions to make moving forward. We have some challenging policy discussions to have there. But while I have the mic, if there is a merchant out there that does want a dedicated space, we have 24 available. They're open right now. And let us know if someone needs one, because we do have spaces dedicated for merchants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Councilor Frangillo.
Appreciate it. I think when we first heard all the parking things, we heard there were three different attack points: signage, policies, and penalties. And each of those needed to be addressed. Especially, I would even put it in that order. Especially signage, adjusting policies where and when you can park, especially in those lots. But then there was this real piece, which is the only piece that we're talking about today, that, the fines are just too low, where, regardless of the policies and the signage that we put out, if we don't have penalties that change behavior, then everything we do doesn't matter. And that's what today's conversation is about, and why we put forward, and why I would even echo Councilor Cormier Ledger's concern about whether 25 is enough of a deterrent overnight. As we talk about policies, I think we keep hearing from everyone, those lots that we have, we have enough parking spaces, we're just not moving the cars to the right places. And a lot of that comes down to opening up those lots, because what we're talking about here is on-street parking in front. And those are the pieces that we want more rapid turnover. So that if you just stop in and buy a coffee, you don't want to be driving around and park up and down the street. You want the one right in front, and so we need turnover there. That's why we have a penalty, and that's why we have the 2-hour there. And if you want to stay longer, then you can go and park, off-site, where most of the businesses already do have their own parking. We have town lots that are available free all weekends as well. We're only talking Monday to Friday, and free all afternoon and evening. So I do think that there still is a need to have the turnover on the main streets, and I do think that there is a need to to increase penalties to make sure that we're accurately changing behavior. I strongly echo the need for updated signage and policies.
Without question. Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Frangillo. Was there anybody else? Did you started to, in the back? No? Okay, you weren't coming up. Okay. And there's nobody else on Zoom. So I guess as I look around the council here and listening to what's been said by many people, I'm not sure we're ready to make these decisions right now. I think more information needs to be gathered, as well as looking at the entire picture. I think a lot of good information has come forward this evening, and I think we need to go back and compile that information, because I think if we try and vote this, even moving it to a second reading, I just don't think there's enough time to make the adjustments that I think need to be made to get a positive vote from the entire council. So I think
Bobby made the motion. He'll need to rescind.
Oh, yeah, I did. You didn't make it, right?
No.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Unless there's other committee members that feel different.
You want to?
You can, absolutely, you can speak to.
I'm concerned about pushing it off too long.
Well, I'm not looking, what I was looking at, there's a meeting planned with the Downtown Partnership on June 2nd.
Yeah.
And they've invited the council as well as our administrator. Jamie, I know, was planning to meet with them?
I was, the June 2nd date is tough because there's a YMCA event at Gillette Stadium, and I think a lot of people from the town are gonna be there, including myself. And it's tough. I mean, I make every downtown partnership meeting. I've probably only missed one or two in my career here. It's just a tough date where there's too much going on.
Mr. Chairman, could we possibly have a
Hang on one
subcommittee?
second.
The Franklin Downtown Partnership would be willing to set up a special meeting
Right.
outside on June 6th.
I think that would work. So I guess, to your point, Councilor Frangillo, I'm not looking to push this off beyond, I'd love to see it come back in June, if possible.
So you have the option of either tabling it generally or to table it to a date and time certain.
Right, I understand that. So, let's try,
Want me to withdraw my
Yep.
motion?
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my motion to move bylaw amendment 22-879 to a second reading.
Thank you.
And
And
need a second.
I'll second that.
Second.
I second, or he second, she second. Yep, withdraw,
Withdraw?
withdraw, you just have to say withdraw, second withdraw.
Second withdrawn?
Yeah.
Is that?
That's all you
Yep.
needed to do. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion to move to table bylaw amendment 22-879 to a date scheduled for our second available
I would
town
say
council
that as
meeting. Actually, is one meeting in June or two meetings? in
Two
June?
meetings in June.
To our second scheduled date for the town council meeting in June.
June 22nd.
June
22nd. 22nd.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor
would it be
Coney.
possible to put into the language that there be a formal subcommittee that addresses this issue, since it's already been to EDC, and since we have volunteers from the district?
I'm not sure a subcommittee's necessary. I think it could go back through EDC again.
Okay.
And they could work as well with the downtown partnership.
Just recommending a little more formality
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
process, that's all.
Yeah, understood. Any other discussion? Seeing none, the vote will come on the motion to table bylaw amendment 22-879 till June 22nd. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, bylaw amendment 22-880, Chapter 70, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 4, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, subsection 170-15, Parking Prohibitions and Limitations, D, Parking Prohibited, Downtown Parking Map, first reading. Clerk will read the bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is bylaw amendment 22-880, chapter 170, Vehicles and Traffic. This is a bylaw to amend the code of the town of Franklin at chapter 170, Vehicles and Traffic at Article 4, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, subsection 170-15, Parking Prohibitions and Limitations, D, Parking Prohibited. Be it enacted by the Franklin Town Council that chapter 170 of the code of the town of Franklin, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 4, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, subsection 170-15. Parking Prohibitions and Limitations, D, Parking Prohibited, is hereby amended as follows. Subsection 170-15, Parking Prohibitions and Limitations. No person shall stand or park any vehicle at any time upon streets or parts thereof where such a prohibition is posted. At bus stops, except buses, and no person shall park a bus within a business district at any place other than a bus stop where a nearby bus stop is available. See it at taxi cab stands, except taxi cabs, and no person shall park a taxi cab upon any street within a business district or any place other than taxi cab stands. Stands designated for use of the taxi cab or taxi cabs, except while engaged or while waiting for the opportunity to use a taxi cab stand designated for use. D, parking prohibited. Downtown parking district boundaries are those contained on map captioned downtown parking district prepared by the town of Franklin Engineering Department dated July 13th, 2016. and revised through the effective dates of this legislation, original to which is on the file at town clerk, and the copy of which is appended hereto as attachment number 1. Prohibitions and limitations on streets contained within the district are shown on said map. This bylaw amendment shall become effective on and after July 1st of 2022, and this map currently on file with the town clerk as recently revised, shall remain in effect until July 1st of 2022.
Move.
Table, I think.
You want to table?
Table or motion?
No.
No, we want
Oh, we
to,
want to table? Okay.
No.
we want to move it to a second reading, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Move bylaw amendment 22-880 to a second reading.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion now. Jamie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is, just so folks understand, completely mutually exclusive of the issue that was just brought up a moment ago. In fact, the people who brought these issues to our attention are completely mutually exclusive for one another as well. And so the proposal before everybody tonight, to Councilor Frangilla's point earlier, that there were these issues raised, and or Councilor Hamlin's point, excuse me, and we charged the police department with looking at some solutions and trying to be minimalist about it, because we know these are important issues, and we're just trying to solve small problems and just try to tweak them. So if folks look up at the map here, they will notice that there's a purple section right here on East Central Street, and right here on Main Street, and then right on Depot, that little piece right there. So this is kind of what you consider, I think, mostly your like Main Street business corridor that I think the Downtown Partnership and others have been referencing over the last hour or so. If you notice, that parking district is commensurate with the rest of all the other purple. You look up here at the legend, 2-hour parking from 8 to 2, Monday through Friday. The proposed section over here changes and adds a new category, which is in orange, which is 2-hour from 8 to 10 parking, Monday through Friday, no overnight. Why are we here doing this? We've heard numerous complaints from folks, particularly on East Central, okay, about the lack of rotation of cars coming around, because most of the businesses on those strips, yes, you may do a walk if you're going to walk around downtown as portrayed by the partnership earlier. These probably aren't your spaces. These are probably for more people dropping people off at school over here, or joining over and going to a shop really quick, or maybe picking up a pair of shoes. And then down here, grabbing a cup of coffee or coffee up here, whatever the dynamics are. And we've heard a lot of frustration for many years about the rotation of cars. And also, we've heard a lot of frustration recently about overnight parking, particularly on East Central Street, where particularly on a Friday or a Thursday, if they can get away with it, somebody's going to put their car, dump it right in front of Hang Time, Birchwood, McGurrow House, any of these businesses, and basically just put the car there for 3 days. You can even go down and watch people pull out backpacks, or bags, and walk down another area of Alpine Row or another road in downtown, and it's just a very convenient place for people to stash the car. We've faced a lot of challenges with this too, because of the aforementioned issues of 2 hours. What are we trying to encourage? And so really what we've come up with is a modest tweak of a policy to add, really, the only thing that's getting added here really is Monday through Friday, you're adding a new district where the 2-hour parking is extended to 10 p.m. And then you're adding the no overnight on the weekdays so that people cannot park their cars there all week or overnight. And then in the morning, all those spaces, the cars are still there. So that's really it in a nutshell. This is a very modest proposal of only 8 hours extra of the 2-hour parking Monday through Friday with no overnight. Certainly, I don't pretend that this is going to solve every problem and is perfect. And it certainly is tweakable if other folks have ideas. But this is the place to start. And the EDC did have a meeting about this, and this proposal was unanimously endorsed 4-0 to move to the council. So I'm sure there'll be questions, and happy to answer them.
Thank you,
Mr.
Jamie.
Chairman.
Councilor Hamblin, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jamie described everything perfectly. We all agreed that no overnight parking would really help this serious issue. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Hamblin. Any other councilors? Councilor Jones?
Mr. Chairman, just based on the discussions, I do think that the yellow zone in particular, the one at the no overnight parking, has been added to, that we do consider reflection on changing the 2-hour minimum to a 3-hour minimum. Or at maximum, I should say.
Jamie?
Through Mr. Chair, I mean, I mean, it's really a question of policy for the council. I think those are your two strips that I'm guessing, but others may have ideas that you want people rotating. And I know it's not optimum for everybody from 8 to noon, but the lot back here, there's just plenty of parking if somebody wants to stay for 5 hours.
Yeah, I agree.
There just is. And the Ferraris lot is the same thing, all afternoon, all night. People want to go walk around downtown, grab a bite to eat, go shopping for a little bit, do a circle, get a walk in, go to the Common, come back. I mean, you could park there pretty long in those parts. So I think the 3-hour part is an interesting idea. I think the chief and Lieutenant Riley are taking notes, and we'll consider these ideas as they go through the rest of the lots. But certainly, it's obviously up for community discussion, and happy to entertain any ideas folks have.
You still have the floor, Councilor Jones.
Again, it's just my thoughts in regards to trying to allow at least a reasonable amount of time, because many of the businesses that are being frequented fall within the yellow zone as proposed on this map. And I understand the rotation, I get that, we want to deter too long a period of time of the spaces that are immediately in front of the businesses, just for the simple point of turnaround, but we also want to promote, people visiting these businesses. I think, and this is in line a lot with what's been mentioned tonight in regards to education and signage, that we definitely need to make these things as clear and educated as we possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. Any other councilors? Is there anyone in the audience? Name and address, please.
Mike Rock, 12 Main Street, business owner. Respectfully, the signage is completely insufficient for casual passerby, okay? And I'd also say that about 70%, give or take, of our foot traffic is between 11 and 2. Okay. So I would ask you just to consider that, it's easy to say, well, mornings they can find someplace else. Anecdotal, repeat multiple times a week, we have people talking to us about there's no place to park. So you may feel like the signage is adequate. My position is, for people who are casually coming downtown, it is not. So I'd also ask, why is this restriction only Monday through Friday when we do over 50% of our business on weekends?
I think it was to answer that question through you, Mr. Chair, it was just the simple starting point. I can't say, this is also a big step for the town to do no overnight parking, and we probably will get more requests for no overnight. And at some point, we have to you can't just prohibit no overnight everywhere, and so we're just kind of taking a cautious, just like a smaller step toward the overnight concept. But if the council or others feel indifferently, we can certainly add no overnight parking to the areas or on other days. I mean, there's certainly nothing that prohibits that. I would just ask to get the opinion of the police to see if they would support a suggestion like that.
Sure.
I would like to also confirm, though, that I understand turn is important, but I'll also say that as a business owner, it is important that people be able to get in there. 3 hours, honestly, does give people a chance to frequent one of our restaurants and at least a couple stores. And you have to have both to pull people into downtown, okay? Thank you.
Any other?
Lisa.
Lisa.
Lisa Piana, 6 Matthew Drive, Franklin Downtown Partnership. So just going back, can you hear me? Thanks, Steve. Just going back to it's really hard to, I think this is part of the whole discussion. So again, I think from the Franklin Downtown Partnership's view is, let's have this discussion and include this, and include what we just discussed with the first piece of it. Because I think what you're hearing from a lot of the business owners is, and residents too, I mean, I've talked to a lot of residents about this, and they want more time for the parking. I don't think overnight parking, I don't think anybody, we've wanted, we've wanted no overnight parking for a while, because we know a lot of the students and are parking overnight, and what's happening is in the morning, they're already parked there in front of the bakery, right? So bakery opens at, you know, at 7 or 8, and there's parking spots already taken. So there shouldn't be overnight parking. I mean, why? I mean, there just really shouldn't be. But as far as looking at these specific areas, I think that's part of the bigger discussion on whether, you know, 2 hours or 3 hours. And so I would just say it's continued in discussion with the overall. It's just so hard to separate, you know, parking, the downtown parking lots is one discussion, and this is another. It's all one. It's all about parking, and it's all about solutions,
Right.
and it's all about signage, and it's all about education. You can't kind of separate that. It's one big discussion, and I think there's a lot of really great ideas from people that aren't in this meeting today that I talked to, so I'd love for you guys to hear those ideas as well. Thank you for your time.
Jamie?
Just, through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't think the 3-hour parking is certainly not an issue. I don't know if people necessarily are opposed to it. This is great feedback. I think the question is for everybody, where do you want the 3-hour parking? Do you want it in front of Teddy Gallagher's, where someone goes in and goes in and eats and has a gathering for 3 hours and then doesn't shop anywhere else? You know, there's a parking lot 150 feet from that where they can park, again, I'm sorry, all afternoon. I also, secondly, you know, I understand the 11 to 2, and I agree with that. The only thing I would say is that's part of the process that Lisa just brought up and others, of why we need to look at the town bylaw about what we had was commuter lots. And so obviously, as I mentioned earlier, that has to get addressed, and maybe the hours can get addressed through that situation. But the question is where does the council or others want 3-hour parking? Everywhere or in certain locations? Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Anyone on the council? Councilor Frangillo.
I would just again say, like, we know that there are lots of different pieces. We also know that we have an issue that we can solve right now. It was true with penalties, and it's true with this. I still think that signage is the most important. Policy changes is the second most important. But the fact that that's not on the table right now doesn't mean that we can't solve a problem, which is no overnight parking.
Right. Any other? Councilor Hamblin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that I agree with Councilor Frangillo that we could actually solve this issue today about no overnight parking. And I think that these will go into effect on July 1st, 2022. Correct, Jamie?
Right, that's correct.
So
That's correct.
it still gives us time to talk to people and to educate people about this. And I know everybody thinks about it as parking is this huge issue, but legislatively, we have to do this one piece at a time. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix the big picture by these fines and policy changes. And we all agree that signage is one of the big things that we've been talking about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Hamblin. Seeing no further discussion, everybody understand that all this is the first reading. So this is being moved from a first reading. It will then go to a second reading. So, seeing no further discussion, The vote will come on the motion to move bylaw amendment 22-880 to a second reading. And it's a majority vote. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No, yeah, I oppose that.
Motion carries. Resolution 22-29, gift acceptance, Fire Department, $275, Veterans Services Department, $100. Clerk will read the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Resolution 2229, acceptance of gift, Fire Department Veteran Services. Whereas the Fire Department and Veteran Services Department have received a generous donation in the total amount of $375 to be used at the discretion of each respective department as follows. Donation summary, Fire Department, $275. Gift receipts received in memory of Joseph Nasuti and Veronica Santo-Domingo to be applied towards the purchase of safety and other related equipment and to support various fire department programs. Veteran Services Department, $100. Gifts to be applied towards the Veterans Municipal Assistance Fund. Please see the attached memo dated April 29th, 2022 for donor information. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Council, Town of Franklin, on behalf of the Fire Department and Veteran Services Department, gratefully accepts these generous donations to be used at the discretion of the respective department as described above. The resolution shall become effective according to provisions of the Town of Franklin Home Rule Charter.
Move resolution 22-29.
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion. Jamie?
I want to thank everybody for their generous contributions.
Absolutely. Thank you for these contributions. Seeing no further discussion from the council, all those in favor of Resolution 22-29 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Town Administrator's Report. Davis Thayer update.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, before the Davis Thayer update, just want to make sure everybody is aware, the town budget was put out 2 weeks ago, and it is online. People should go to franklinma.gov and check out town budget. It's right there, and hopefully people can lead right to the FY23 budget. All the materials are there for the entire budget, which is my shameless plug for the Finance Committee budget hearings begin on May 9th. May 9th will be general government. May 11th will be public safety and DPW. And May 12th will be the schools. And I also know that the Superintendent McGuire will be here from Tri-County. We've invited over the Aggie as well to participate in those hearings. So May 9th, May 11th, and May 12th, I will be here all night next week. Maybe I'll have overnight party. But those hearings are next week. And then on regarding Davis Thayer, I put it on as an agenda item so there could be a discussion if folks had questions. I know this has taken a little while longer than folks may realize, and I'm going to break the news. It might be a little while longer. The main reason is there is a regulation at the Mass School Building Authority, the MSBA, where if you close a school within 10 years, you have to report it to the MSBA, because if you ever contemplate building another school in the future within a certain time frame, you can actually be penalized. And that isn't critically important because from a financing standpoint at the state level, it really does take away situations in the past where towns have tried to shed old school buildings and then turn around 2 more years later and file for a 50% reimbursement, 70% reimbursement on a school project. So in the best interest of actually the taxpayers, the MSBA does have this rule. Mike D'Angelo, the superintendent, and myself have all been trying to get in touch with the MSBA for a while. And the good news is after 4 or 5 months of outreach, we did have a meeting with them about a month ago. It was a very productive meeting. They now understand, and they have all the documentation as to why the school committee decided to close the building. The only bit of that is huge progress. And for those that have dealt with the MSBA before, I hope I have your support and that is huge progress. The one downside to this discussion is I got a follow-up email, the superintendent and I got a follow-up email today at 1:30 from the MSBA laying out the rules of the road. And unfortunately, the one caveat we have to wait is that by their regulations, we have to wait 6 more months. The school committee will have to wait 6 more months to dispose of or declare the property as surplus to ensure that the town doesn't get penalized in the next decade if there was, for some reason, another proposal for another school. I have talked to the superintendent today about that. And the one other note I would add is I did get the okay from her and the new incoming superintendent to see if we can continue to honor that commitment to many of the citizens that wanted to go into the building for nostalgia purposes and to look around. Some of the rooms still have to be cordoned off because we're storing the PPE there, and there still is school furniture that's being discussed about whether or not those needs are needed or not. And so we will wait, and probably anticipating in the fall is when I would hope that the school committee might consider declaring Davis Thayer as surplus property. So unfortunately, we have to wait 6 more months, but in the interim, we are going to work on a date to try to have a community event where people that went to school there and others that want to go inside and look around and to try to be able to have a memorial event to be able to go into the school. So that's my update. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions? Councilor Pellegrini.
Very unhappy with that.
Yeah.
That you just said. Makes no sense, because why wasn't this said 6 months ago? We've been
Yeah.
talking about closing the school for how long?
Yeah. It's
An answer, yeah.
to be honest with you, none of us in this room, nor Mark, who's a pretty smart guy and been around this stuff. You've done this for a long time. I've built schools in other communities. Sometimes there are obscure rules that you don't really know of, and that's why you do your due diligence to check with the MSBA to make sure you don't put yourself in the short term, in the long term, make sure you get yourself into a dither. I will also admit, it's taken us a while to get in touch with them. They're still working, they were working remotely. Most of them still are. They're not back at Ashburton. And they're not the easiest state agency to get in touch with. It's just the truth. And so it's taken us a while, and it's unfortunate. But the good news is now we have clarity. We have the email on record. We have the ruling from the MSBA. And now it's really our job to really implement what the MSBA has asked us to do. So I should also say one last quick thing, Mr. Chairman. The future use, it's on the goals for the council, for those interested in Davis Thayer. It's a goal. Ultimately, the future of that school is going to have to be decided by some sort of committee to look at the entire parcel of land, the condition of the building, the potential uses. We all have heard rumors. We've all heard many false rumors. We all have ideas that won't work. We have ideas that may work. There's going to have to be a very extensive process on the reuse of that school. There will be ample time for public comment, public decision, and input on the future of Davis Thayer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And certainly, any rumor or any statement that anybody has heard is clearly a rumor.
Right.
Because
Thank
there
you.
is nothing on the books. And having been probably the only one in this room that has had more dealings with the MSBA is probably Mark than I have. I concur with Jamie. They are not an easy group to communicate with.
Yeah.
But I have to take a shot. Because I read the letter, and it says clearly in number 1, districts that are contemplating removing a school from service are required to notify the MSBA 6 months in advance of the intended closing. The town has satisfied this requirement and should keep the MSBA updated as the town council, as the town further develops its plan. Does it not say we've done it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it sounds like.
They just did it.
But
if we just did.
I mean, I'm not reading, I'm reading the email that was sent. And it clearly says that we satisfied them.
Yeah.
Can we,
Talk to the school committee and see if there's
yeah.
another
I
option?
mean, if
Sure.
you read number one, it clearly says that.
It's going nowhere.
So,
Really, thank you. I just want to add in a couple more quick points. I know this feels frustrating, and I firmly respect that for a lot of people, okay? But we also have to respect the school committee's territory on this, and I know we do. They just had an election like everybody did. They have a lot of new members. They just established a space needs and facilities assessment subcommittee to deal with the issues all of you are aware with in terms of the overall issues with facilities, space use at the schools. There's a learning curve. I think many new members would argue that's the same thing. There's a learning curve to a lot of this. And I think what we've been trying to do is be as courteous and respectful of the school committee's procedure on this. But I will certainly reach out to the superintendent and the school committee tomorrow and ask them what their future plans are on that.
and I want to be clear, my shot was not at the school committee.
Understood.
My shot is clearly at
Yeah.
MSBA, Brian Kelly, who wrote this email.
Yeah.
You got it?
So,
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
Counselor
I'm
Jones.
glad you read that, Mr. Chairman. That's a valid piece of email right there. But I think in regards to if, in respect to the school committee, and if we have to wait the 6 months, it doesn't change the fact that we should be giving some thought into
Oh, yeah.
what our
Without
projected potential
Oh,
use
yeah,
of that
absolutely.
property should be. I mean, even if it means, there's no, as far as my understanding of the rules, there's nothing that can prevent us
No.
from putting forth anything for projected
Sure.
proposal uses for those
we
buildings.
could.
So even if we wanted to start establishing some kind of a subcommittee towards addressing the use of the Davis there,
could do
we
that.
can always set that up now.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
We could. Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Counselor Plagree.
Is this something that our attorney can look into for us? I mean,
Number
it
one,
says
the
it's point
schools have
blank.
their own legal counsel. Number two, I don't have any way, any better than any of you to deal directly with the MSBA. Number three, I haven't been intimately involved with this. My gut reaction is what they're basically saying is, don't do anything that's irreversible, like take a vote declaring it surplus, or move ahead with a worse disposition, and that's what it relates to, which, again, would not foreclose you going to a planning exercise.
Right, I guess my concern is the 6 months, because it clearly says in here that that's been satisfied, that requirement has been satisfied. Then why do we have to wait? So I just like clarity on that. I know it won't be easy to get it from MSBA, but I would certainly like an attempt made to get that clarity.
That was
Any-
very good, I'm still with the floor. That was very good of you to get that letter, to be able to read that to us and let us know exactly what's happening. We thank you.
Thank you, Council Plagree. Any other questions or comments on Town Administrator's report? Okay, up.
Could I just ask you, through you,
We can hear him back there.
through you.
Rick Ciccone.
The gentleman's, Rick Ciccone, Chestnut Street. The gentleman whose name you, what is his title, this gentleman? General Counsel.
He's the
Chairman.
Deputy General Counsel.
And he says we've met the requirements.
That's
That's
what
how
it's-
you read it?
That's how I read it. And
It
I'm
sounds
looking to get clarity
We should
from
not,
them.
just one, again, as I said before, one man's opinion, we should not wait 6 months. We
No.
have from their legal counsel.
I gotta say it, I'm sorry.
Well,
Okay,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. The people coming here, with all due respect, Mr. Saccone, I respect the fact that you come and make a comment. This is a school committee policy decision, and I know everybody here understands that. If we're looking to move the ball down the field on this more significantly, we should be aiming our energy at the school committee from citizens who feel that we should start moving this along and wrap it up.
Right.
And ultimately, I've been trying to toe a fine line with respecting their jurisdiction, and this is a complicated matter, and there's a lot of new members, and they're trying to get up to speed. I'm just trying to respect the school committee's process. So if Mr. Saccone wants to move this up, you know, I would respectfully ask you to go to the school committee meetings and talk to those members and advocate that you know.
declare it surplus.
Declare it surplus. Thank you.
Do I still? I watch the school committee meetings. I'm messed up like that. And I haven't heard them discuss this. It sounds to me, with all due respect, it seems like this is just the superintendent's decision. I have never heard I have never heard that
School committee,
discussed.
I will tell you, because I know the law when it comes to this.
Tom, if I may, while I have the floor,
Yeah.
I have not heard them discuss this. It seems, again, just an opinion, that this is the superintendent's way of saying we're gonna hold off. That committee is all new, or 80% of it's new folks. They have not discussed this, at least not in open meeting. So I may be wrong in what I'm saying. They could have discussed it under,
Executive
thank
session.
you, but it has not been discussed in open meeting.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think we've beat this a little bit enough. So if you just get clarification as best you can, and I know it won't be easy. Subcommittee reports. EDC, I think, is the only one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the EDC Plus Steering Committee met tonight. We kind of took a breath and discussed things, how we thought the process of the Franklin for All was going. We started to talk about some of the ideas where we want to focus. And it was nice to start to have this conversation just within the steering committee. There is the next public forum about the Franklin for All project will be at the Black Box on May 16th at 6:30. So hopefully everyone, it will be a hybrid meeting, so you can be there or you can Zoom in, and hopefully a lot of people will attend that. We should get some of the high-end recommendations of some zoning at this forum, so it would be nice for people to be there and to be ready to give their opinions. And I know that we have a lot of people that will give us their opinion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Hamblin. I think that was the only subcommittee that had met. Future agenda items. Councilor Sheridan.
Nothing at this time.
Councilor Frangillo.
So we don't give up on parking.
We won't.
We're not going to give up.
I don't think anybody's going to allow us to do that. So, Councilor Hamblin.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Councilor Cormier Ledger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for the fact that it's 10:30, but I do have a couple to
Sure, shoot.
bring up. One, to Mr. Cass's point, brought up what seems like days ago about the climate crisis, and I think we should put as a future agenda item some way to address that, and maybe plans as a town. Maybe it's interdepartmental, but, you know, some sort of discussion to address the climate change concerns. To Congressman Auchincloss's point, I think a future agenda item about the parking garage at the MBTA site being a partnership discussion between local, state, MBTA, and federal. I think it's an excellent one. I would love to see it on the docket, just so we continue to carry it forward. He sounded open to it. There might be obvious possibilities and a lot of work there, but we heard from multiple people parking's an issue, and that might be a way to solve that. And finally, if we have these 24 lease spaces available to merchants and nobody's using them, nobody's buying them, then I really do think we need to review those 24 spaces as a legislative entity and maybe come up with a different use for them.
And
Thank you.
we will be doing that.
Okay.
So, thank you, Councilor
It's already on,
Cormier.
it's already on our agenda.
Councilor Plegry. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think since one of my future agenda items was to invite Congressman Auchincloss here, and that was successful, I'd like to add to a future agenda to invite Gandhi in for one of our meetings. Maybe we might, no, I'm just joking. No, that's it, Mr.
Councilor DeLarco.
How do you invite the dead?
Yeah, that's a great idea with the MBTA. There are two people who will show up, the state and the congressman. The T won't show up. Trust me. No, nothing at this time. Trust me. I worked here 23 years.
Just on a lighter future agenda item, I would think that maybe it might be a good time to bring in Ben Franklin and bring in Jamie and
He's coming in
just
soon.
talk about a little bit about what they've been doing, where they visited, plus give the community a little knowledge as to what's going on.
I could use Ben too. We'll get him here. It'll be a direct order.
He's up at King Street Park every afternoon.
We'll bring him for every traffic parking meeting the rest of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Let's see, councilor comments. Councilor Cormier Ledger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll do a positive and a negative.
Okay.
My positive would be congratulations to Lucas Goodyear on being appointed by the school committee as our new acting superintendent of schools. Very, very well deserved. Excellent choice, great guy. My negative, just to echo the frustrations of other people on this board, I think the Davis-Thayer conversation's been going on too long. I think we just need to come to a resolution. If it's on the school committee, say so. If it's on this other entity that's hard to get a hold of, then say so. The school closed months ago. It's negligent on our part at this point to our constituents not to be moving this forward. To delay this another 6 months is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Plegry.
I ditto everything that he just said, the two, Mr. Lucas and the Davis there.
Thank you. Councilor Sheridan.
Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Frangillo.
Just a few events. Rail Trail Committee race is Saturday at Remington Jefferson at 9 in the morning. We got the Metro West Arts and Culture Symposium on the 14th at the high school, Franklin for All, which has already been mentioned, and Empty Bowls. They do a fantastic fundraiser on the 19th at Franklin High.
Thank you, Councilor Frangillo. Councilor Hamblin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to quickly thank the fire chief, firefighters, the DPW, everybody who got us to the #1 rating, because my homeowner's insurance premium went down. So, all that work, they're saving us money, and I think that's awesome. Thanks to Congressman Auchincloss for being here. That was a great conversation. The audit, the staff, Scott, it was amazing. Thank you to all the staff, does all this great work for us. And finally, I'd like to thank my fellow counselors in the community for condolences about my dad. You know, he stayed at home with us throughout till the end, and I would sit with him at night. And one night he would say these things to me, and he always like kind of like raised his eyebrow and he gave you this look, and he said, "Mel, I've always shied away from political involvement, but I'm proud of you. Don't give up. Continue to build your bridges." And so I've had a lot of people ask me, what can they do to help, and what help me, that they want to do more than just send me a card. So this is what everyone can do to help. They can help us build the bridges, to create community unity, to treat each other with respect and kindness, and allow other people to have different opinions and not to make fun of them, and just to accept people even if they're different than you are. So, with that, I will say thank you and good night.
Thank you, Councilor Hamlin. Councilor Jones.
Just too tired. I can get up at 4:30.
Councilor Delaco.
I get up at 4, so I'm with him.
Okay, I just have a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to again thank Congressman Auchincloss for coming this evening. I sent his office an email a couple of months ago with just to see if he might come. And like that, they got back to me and said, sure, so let's work on a date.
Dana's awesome.
Yeah. So I'd like to thank him for coming. Congratulate Lucas Jaguar as our new superintendent of schools. Again, I'd be remiss if I didn't congratulate Harriet DiMartino. The DiMartinos are lifelong friends, and I've known her since I was this high. So congratulations on her 100th birthday. And again, offer my condolences to the Hamblin family. And also, I'd like to offer condolences to my son-in-law and his family, the Narducci family, who lost Jenny, my son-in-law's mother, this past weekend. So condolences to the entire Narducci family. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Non-debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, one and all.